Thanks. So this is the Wellington Board of Finance. The meeting will come to order now at 7:01. It's February 23rd, 2023, and it's a budget meeting. Welcome, everyone. I don't know if we need to see alternates. Yes, we
Jeff's not
do.
here, so I move that we see Jim Gilligan for Jeff.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstained?
Welcome,
Okay.
Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Hope you know this.
Jim, you want to sign in? You want to give us a little sound check so we can make sure we'll.
I'm on board. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay, we're gonna dispense with the approval of minutes, because we don't have the next ones ready. So let's go to present to speak. Anyone in the room who would like to speak, who's, about something that they don't have to speak about in just a few minutes? Okay, anyone online who wants to speak? Nick Tella.
Hey, Nick Teller, 49 Myrtle. Just want to state that when looking at the school building project, to take serious consideration into Ralph's calculator. That's all I have to say for now. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So let's just move right ahead with the first up, which is, Donna, maybe, should we talk about probate first? I can fill people in on that if
Thank you,
you
Steph.
want. That's,
Yeah.
okay, I think consider that as maybe a placeholder for 4,000. That is determined by the grand list, and there's the assessor obtained an extension to finish that, and it's that the grand list isn't due until February 28th. So we don't really have a figure. That's something that's kind of assigned to us. It's not something we negotiate. But we share it with we share the district, the Tallinn District Court District with Mansfield, Tallinn, Coventry, and Wellington. So,
Hey, Steph, I just noticed that Peter's hands up. I don't know if we missed him during part of the speech.
oh, okay, well, we can circle back to that. Let me just finish this and then I'll come back to you, Pete, okay? So anyway, because of that extension, we don't have an actual figure, but I think we can put a placeholder in of 4,000, which would be a 5% increase. And I think that would easily cover it. It was in the current year, it's in for 3,810. And for fiscal year 22, it was 3,918. So it's nestled in there right under 4K. What's that? And Pete,
Mandatory spending, and we don't have any.
we don't have
what
any
it-
say over it, so,
Yeah, there we go.
we don't really need to take a specific vote necessarily,
Right.
except I guess we could renege, but that would be bad. Peter, did you have something to say for present to speak? The tin chicks? Okay. Maybe he's just saying hi. Okay, well, we can come back if we need to do that. Anyone else? Is everyone showing right now? Okay. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the registrars of voters. Suzanne Chapman, are you presenting or both of you presenting?
We're
Co-presenting?
together.
Oh, I love that. I just kind of like double
And again,
stand up.
Apologies for the error in the letter. We had made some changes in our budget after the letter was created, and I just got that.
Yeah, well, but the lower number was the one you had in your spreadsheet. so-
Right, right. the spreadsheet's all correct.
Good for budgeting purposes, but
So we'd be happy to talk about any questions that you might have on what we presented, and then
Well,
after we get through our budget in itself, we'd like to talk a little bit about early voting.
oh, okay, good. I was gonna just say, that was gonna be the first thing I was gonna ask you to talk about, but we can wait on that if you want to go through the budget first.
Do you have any questions, so right now on what we've
In the
presented?
budget? Sure, let me see. Anyone feel free to jump in on that. So the basic figures are, I don't know if you can put these budgets up, Sam, or if that's gonna be difficult. But the spreadsheet, you don't need to put the letters up.
Yeah. I'm trying to
This
figure
is
out
the
what-
registrar voters.
I'll find it and put it up.
Okay, thanks. So we'll just start out then. Basically, the salary line is going up to 27,275, but that's the sort of town increase of 2.75%. And the overall budget request, hey Jeff, is 48,116, and that's a 1.5% increase. I was wondering when you were talking about referendums and they, generally cost around 1,000 if we had one in during the year. There's one already in for a potential new school referendum, or is that already the budget or not for this
There's
year?
a typo in the cover letter. No, we decided it was just too much speculation
Okay,
at the time, so we decided to take it out because it's not clear. We talked about it, we discussed it with Erica, we talked about the timeline.
mhm,
So we didn't want to put another school building project referendum in the new budget. There is, in the current fiscal year's budget, we did budget for school.
okay, gotcha, that's what I was asking.
So we're all set for the current fiscal year.
Okay,
And we decided not to, should there, for whatever
Right.
reason, be another referendum related to it, the cost would be in the neighborhood of $1,000. And we just decided not, we have so much to speculate about right now.
it sounds like
We
it.
decided not to go with that.
And we'll get to that, because I do think we want to hear from, just for planning purposes for all that. Are there other questions on the board for the registrars? There is one thing I wanted to ask you guys, how you said the hours that have the hours fluctuated, in terms of election events that you all staff because of same day registration and things like that have come in more recent times than older times. I'm just wondering if you can talk
When
on
we
that.
first started as registrars, we were sold on the idea that it was a 10 to 12-hour a week job at the most. I would say if we were to average everything out, it's more like 20, 25 hours a week over the course of the year. Some weeks more, some weeks less. But we've seen as new legislation has passed and more things have to be done in preparation for an election, more things have to be done at the actual election with election day registration. We've seen an increase in our hours and expect that.
Okay,
Well, when we get, we'll talk about it.
okay.
Yeah, do you want me? I just have a few thoughts, Stephanie.
Oh, sure, sure. But tell me first, when you say when we started, when was that?
Oh, I'm 10 years.
10, Christine's 10 years and
You're coming up
now,
on 10.
and I'll be 10 years in, I think, August.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
Okay, so this, I'm hoping will bring up some more thoughts and questions. So we're asking for a slight increase of 1.5% over the current fiscal year's budget. As you know, our budget is dependent on election cycles, so it does fluctuate from budget year to budget year. We are mindful of our spending throughout the fiscal year and have over the years returned funds to the town. In our cover memo, early in-person voting is mentioned. Currently, there are 3 bills in the legislature, and we need to state that we just don't know which bill will be passed, how many days of early voting will be required, or how many hours in those days early voting will take place. The only thing we do know is that our workload will increase and the number of hours we will be required to work will increase. A bill may be passed within the next 6 weeks. All the proposed bills state that early voting will start at each regular election on or after July 1, 2023, and primaries after January 1, 2024. So that's like the first 7 months of the next fiscal year. Secretary Thomas has said that she would like the state to help with or provide the funding for updated software, new hardware, and training for all registrars statewide. But will the state help us financially with the increased cost for the printing of additional ballot styles, with the additional cost of programming the tabulators' memory cards, for hiring additional personnel, or for an increase in our salaries? The last few items I just mentioned are normally built into our budget, but tonight we just don't know what these increased costs will be, and they are not in our budget we're presenting tonight. We'd also like to note that there are 2 areas of security that need to be addressed. The first one, all proposed bills state that at the conclusion of each day during the early voting period, the registrars shall transport the secured depository receptacle to the town clerk, who shall retain the ballots until election day. While there is a vault in the building, the town clerk currently does not have an area or a cabinet that could safely store these ballots within the vault. We're also concerned about our safety, since early in-person voting will occur before and after regular work hours here at the town office building. We're suggesting a doorbell that will be heard in our office to be installed at the front door, and that lighting in the parking areas be increased. The budget we're presenting tonight reflects what we do know right now, but many changes are coming soon.
Okay, one thing I wanted to ask you about, when your narrative says you're slightly above minimum wage, about what is, I know you're not hourly per se, like, but when in your computation, about what do you guys make about an hour?
Well, the $27,000 is divided for this, in this proposed budget, is divided between the 2 of us. So that's what, $13,500 a year? Is that right? Off the top of my head?
Yeah,
That's
right. So,
And I think that our hours fluctuate from year to year. I think I calculated last fiscal year, I might have made $25 an hour.
okay.
There are years in the past, I don't come anywhere near that. It's much, much lower, especially during a presidential
or a pandemic.
or a pandemic. Yeah.
As a point
Fill in the P word, huh?
as a point of reference, Steph,
Yeah,
that's like $26 an hour for $10 a week for over the course of a year at 27.
that would be,
That's, no, it's 13 because they.
No, I already
divided by 2.
here, you already
Correct,
divided.
it's 26 after the division,
Say what your reference point was
10
again.
hours a week.
Yeah, but they said they're working 20.
They said they're working 25, yeah, the assumption was, what I'm
The
trying to get
assumption is
at is,
10.
the assumption was 10, and that's about a $25 an hour salary. Said 25 significant.
So they're making-
Oh, yeah,
about 12.
originally 10, yeah. But they're saying it's about double that or more, yeah. Okay,
So you're not
Stephanie,
making minimum wage.
I know, what do I want to say, yesterday at the State House,
Yeah.
there was a public hearing on these bills, were presented. Suzanne had some time to listen to a bit of the testimony, and it sounds as though during these early voting days, the hours that early voting will be available will be like all day, 8 AM until 8 PM.
They're going to be set by the legislation. For the Secretary Thomas would like to see 10 days. The three bills before in committee now, one calls for 10 days, one is for 14 days, one is for 18 days. The 10-day early voting period would be 88 hours. That's just for the operation of early voting. That doesn't include any preparation or anything. It would be from 10 AM to 6 PM. And the last Wednesday and Thursday prior to the election, it would be from 8 AM to 8 PM. All three bills specifically mention those hours. So if the 14-day bill passes, that's 120 hours of early voting. That's 120 hours of paid staff. And all three bills also discuss same-day registration in conjunction with early voting. That's two separate processes. So we were thinking naively, when we first started thinking about these bills, we would do that with two people and it would be good. But you throw same-day registration into the mix, that's another process. That's more people. We have to have access to CPRS. And it's just,
Suzanne, would that
it's
be
a lot.
two people for early voting, or would you have to have a moderator, a checker, a ballot tender?
It'll be,
No.
we think it'll be similar to election day registration now.
Okay,
You come into our office, we register you, we check to make sure that you are registered, eligible to vote. We give you a ballot, we give you an envelope to put the ballot in, you sign,
and then
you
you
sign an
do.
affidavit, and then you drop it in a box.
All right,
None of the bills talk about using a tabulator. They took that language out before they got to committee.
okay.
could you guys, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, but how, is this likely to happen, or are the town clerks, is there the Association of Town Clerks trying to change the wording?
Well,
No.
RONA is our professional organization and the town clerk's professional organization. And have been in communication with Secretary Thomas.
Mhm.
They've had many meetings to discuss the language and various complications and moving parts that really need to be thought about in regards to the legislation. Many of those things have already been incorporated into the bills, but there's quite a few more that really need to be addressed. For instance, if we were to have a 10-day early voting period, that's 88 hours of early voting. Our town office building would be open and the town clerk's office available for less than 50% of those hours. And that just increases as the days go up. So
Right.
it's,
So most towns are probably thinking about this, and a bigger town would have logistically, I don't even know how you would do it. So that's telling me maybe it won't happen exactly how they're proposing it, but
The old unintended consequences.
yeah, and it's an unfunded mandate. It's just another one. Well, this one incorporates like
everyone
5.
talks about all the members on the committee, the GAE committee, and the testimony that I listened to today, as well as Secretary Thomas and folks that spoke, said that the state has got to back this up with funding.
Mhm.
because, municipalities just can't afford it.
Mhm.
But the reality is for a 10-day voting period, we're talking in the neighborhood of $10,000 for Wellington.
Mhm.
That's every voting event.
Yeah, but it's
not
not just
the
elections,
year.
it's primaries.
It's primaries.
And some
They-
bills also state for special election and referendum.
They have taken referenda out of the mix and the two bills that are favored by Secretary Thomas. And she has asked them to take special elections out. Given the timeframes involved with special elections and referendum, it would be very difficult to manage. I plotted it out on a calendar because the initial language we had did say referendum, and the referendum early voting period would overlap with the presidential preference primary early voting period and primary, and we'd have to be running early voting on the day of the primaries. So it's good that they're taking, it seems pretty clear the referendum will be involved.
Erica, do you want to comment on this? Because I guess that one of the questions I have is if there's extended early voting in town hall during hours that are normally closed, is there anything infrastructure wise or just opening the town hall officially that you would have to do differently that would have an impact?
I think some of the security things that they're talking about, because their office would need to be open. Their office is in one wing of the upstairs, and the town clerk's is the opposite wing. So the whole upstairs would then be open. And someone, I believe, would have to be in the town clerk's office, maybe have to be in the town. I don't know what that, right, depends on what this language looks like. So, certainly there are concerns about safety are important, and that could mean some infrastructure outside, some, new lighting, ability to keep the door locked but accessible. And then the storage of ballots is certainly a concern. Our town clerk has been saying for some time that our vault is getting smaller as we have more records to keep. So there are a lot of moving parts. My concern is, my question to you is, when they say 10 days, are we talking 10 business days or 10 days?
10 days.
So now we talk weekends. We are not
Yes.
open on weekends.
Yeah.
So there's an increased electricity use, increased heating costs depending on the time of year. So
And that period, whether it be 10 days, 14 days, or 18 days, they're talking weekends.
that's what I,
Yeah,
that's what I was,
talking weekends.
so that's a whole different story. We are not open on weekends. And
The early
so-
voting period in all three of the bills were then 2 days prior to the election. So Saturday or Sunday prior to the election, the early voting period would stop. And then we would have to prepare for the election in one day. Not that we wouldn't be trying our best to prepare for it before then, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Thanks for this discussion. I don't know if you got, I know it's myriad bills. If you can start sort of collecting impact figures, it sounds like you already are.
We just looked at it very briefly based on what we thought we would need for staff. And for a 10-day voting, 10 days of early voting, it's around $10,000. Just for staff.
and the
supplies.
impact-
And it's not just, without getting into the weeds, the memory cards for the tabulator are programmed to count official ballots, absentee ballots, and election day registration ballots. Now they have to be programmed to also count early voting ballots. So that's additional coding on programming on the memory cards. That's also an additional ballot style that has to be coded and printed by the printer. So the programming costs increase, the ballot costs increase, the processing time increases
Yeah.
to get all these numbers figured in. And it's not just the hours of operation of early voting. The bills say that CVRS will be updated at the conclusion of every day of early voting.
Oh, CVRS is the,
Centralized voter registration.
right, that's where all of the registered voters are.
Okay.
So we have to access that every day, make sure we get that information in on who voted that day. and then get ready for the next day and do it again.
And you say in your narrative that, that we print ballots for some voting events in-house, right?
Referendum, we
That's
do.
only our budget
Referendum,
referendum
okay.
that we
Yeah.
print in-house. Yeah, these ballots right now are costing us 50 cents each. And Suzanne does a great job. We've been keeping records for the last 10 years, so we could look back historically to say, okay, you know, especially for budget referendum, this percentage turned out, this percentage turned out the next year. So we try to come extremely close to the bone and not order 1,000 extra ballots at 50 cents each.
Okay,
The
So-
problem with this is that we have no idea how many people are gonna show up and want an early vote. So how many ballots do we budget for? You know, it's.
As you can hear, there's just a lot of moving parts right
Right.
now. There's so
Okay.
much unknown. What we're presenting again to you tonight is what we know right now. You know, come 3, 4, 5 months from
Yeah.
now, everything could change
Mhm.
drastically.
Mhm.
Secretary mentioned today the day that she would like the bill to be voted on so that preparations can be made for the municipal. It's not a lot of time. They're talking about, well, they're talking about modifications to the centralized voter registration system. They're talking about training for that module. They're talking about training of election officials, recruitment of poll workers. It's not a lot of time for all the training necessary to accomplish this. So it's gonna be, she's pushing to have it, the legislation approved as soon as possible to sort of broaden that window of preparation for it.
Okay, well, I would urge you to stay in touch with us as this unfolds,
I'm
especially.
sorry.
I would urge you to stay in touch with us as this unfolds, you know, and
Well, as soon as there's a single bill to go before the legislature, we'll let you know what the language in that bill entails. It doesn't mean that it won't change at all again once it goes before the legislature. It could. But it should be pretty solid by the time it gets to that point, I would think. What we know is that it's gonna happen.
Yes.
That's really the only given,
Right.
it's gonna happen.
I don't think many people thought it would happen this quickly. I thought they were taking,
We
we
were
thought they were
hopeful.
taking more time
We were
to
hopeful.
lay out the process.
Yeah.
That would be
So,
nice, but
Yeah,
the state, you know, the state, we don't think that they're gonna be ready. We need new hardware. We need new software. Are they gonna be able to get that done within the next 4 to 5 months?
Right.
Every time we open our laptops for a voting event, we remember that we're living on borrowed time with them. And we talked seriously about whether or not we should ask for new laptops, but at this point, we feel like we should wait, because if they're going to certify poll books, we want to make sure what we get will work for what they certify, and if they're gonna fund stuff, maybe they'll buy us laptops, who knows, you know? We don't.
well, you guys have more breaking news than just about any budget we've heard from recently, so, and usually don't have breaking news, but this is big, so thank you
Thank
for
you.
that explanation and heads up. I guess we can go back to, well, we could go to the Board of Finance budget. And it's pretty much not showing an increase of any kind. And does anyone want to raise any issues about that? I think the one thing that we've had before is the miscellaneous line, which at the time was put there for reasons of possible legal consult on issues that are sort of Board of Finance, separate Board of Finance issues and go ahead, Pete.
It's also more important than that in some cases, like when that teacher's retirement fund came up.
Right, and
that would have been a much better place to stash that money than in the Board of Education budget, because then we wouldn't have been jammed up on the minimum budget requirement when they pulled it back. So it's a way of, it's a space where we can put money if we can foresee a problem coming up that we don't know whether it's gonna happen or not, so that we can plan prudently and not, and still keep it under our control.
that may be a significantly different issue. That sounds like a holding pen for
Yeah, I
for
believe,
money with, you know.
yeah, and
I don't
believe
think that's
what-
why it was intended, that 1,200 that's in there.
No, that's not the 1,200 that's
No.
in there.
I was just
But
kind of
that's,
addressing
that's
that.
where that line is, I mean, what else that line can be used for?
It used to be called contingency.
I don't know what,
Contingency.
yeah,
Mhm.
It's a whole separate department.
Huh?
That's its own department.
No, there used
Board
to
of
be,
Finance contingency is its own department, not a
yeah, it
line.
used to be on our budget.
It's still in the budget. It's a
No, I know,
completely
it's
different
its own line
department.
item on our, just, anyway, whatever.
Oh, you mean that there is an
There
account
is an
called that,
account
but it's in
the
a separate
selectmen-
part?
Okay.
For whatever reason, it's in the selectmen's budget called Board of Finance contingency.
all
And I
right.
think
Okay.
I thought
that-
that's, I had.
Thank you for
Thank
clarifying
you.
that. So there is a place, but it's in a different
So
spot.
that would keep something like that in the general government budget.
Yeah.
This board, so true.
Instead of in our private little coffer area. Okay.
And it all stays in the same
Probably a
account.
good idea. Anyone have any other questions or
Right.
points to be made?
Playing the new guy card, because somebody just talked me through the secretary not being an increase, you know?
It's not, the secretary, the secretary cost is pretty much fixed for, recording secretaries
Yeah.
system-wide.
Right, so the.
And in our case-
$20 an hour, and it's based on the number of hours.
Yeah, in our case, Sam works harder than a lot of them because
Oh, no
we
question,
meet,
work ethic.
like in the budget season, no, in the budget season, we meet weekly. A lot of these, like, you know, like say the zoning board of appeals meets kind of seasonally, just, you know, things like that. I can't, you know, I really don't have a recap other than just my top of mind knowledge about how often boards meet.
I was just
but
curious, because
that's most of them meet monthly.
Expenditures aren't tracking.
And
It's
so-
not a typical salary,
Yeah.
Jim, it's, at this point, it's like a fixed rate for recording secretaries. Some boards and commissions are staffed by, a staff member.
Mhm.
And some are specifically appointed as recording secretaries, and that current salary is $20 per hour.
Well, I guess that's what I'm wondering about, just from my own personal knowledge, is because our past expenditures don't seem to, you know. So it's based on demand or just on need.
Yeah, right, so the number of hours in which
Oh,
it
yeah.
takes, so I think.
So we're just
Well, we
we're
had
capturing a
Kelsey
placeholder
filling
that
in-
isn't
filling
necessarily-
in for a
Kelsey
while.
filling in sometime
Yeah.
last year, when,
We had-
when their meetings weren't in person, there was no need for that recording secretary to be here a half an hour prior to a meeting to prepare things. So there was a lot less time used in what you can see on the spreadsheet. If you went back farther, it's probably closer to this time, but to this dollar amount.
Yeah, it's
And I think there were
limited window
times-
on these.
Yeah.
I think there were a few times where we didn't have anyone.
Well, there was a lot of
After-
time. There was a lot of
yeah,
time.
yeah, so-
Since Jeff left,
So
there were
that's
times
some
he
of the
didn't have any-
underspending, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Moving on. So, treasurer. Lori Semperbon, you're online, I see.
I am, and I even turned my camera on.
Oh, there you go, big time. So, let's see.
Correct, it is.
Were you able to get the updated sheet, Steph?
Yes, we did get that.
Okay,
It still says 21, 22, but other than that.
well, that's my mistake.
We'll get that fixed up.
Is that the current one or the previous one?
Both.
That's not the one I sent you, I don't think.
The one that I just put up isn't the one. It's the
No,
one
it's
that's
not the one I
Yeah,
sent
it's
you.
selected at the top.
1%. No, not that one. It's this one.
That's the one I have.
I think that's.
It's the one, we just sent it out,
She sent it.
we sent a replacement out you know, a couple of days ago, I think.
Not the
So,
one you just put up there?
It's not the one that's
no,
printed.
here, let me. And then, actually, I need to put the wrong one, actually. Do you think you printed the wrong
Do
one?
you have a copy of that stuff? I'll just go.
I've got a copy.
Hey, unless it's, that one's in the bag.
You're logged in, you're here.
Print out
No, but you're here.
the one, too. Well, Lori, I think you could go ahead and explain what, actually, the only thing that the corrected copy does is bring the increase for the new fiscal year up to 2.75%, which is this, you know, the sort of standing guideline in the town budgets. So that's the only difference. So
Yeah, I
you could-
apologize. I was trying to do this early before I left on my trip and I didn't know what the numbers were. So essentially, when I met with you a couple of weeks ago, this is the budget more or less that I gave you then, with an increase to actually cover the hours that I work. And again, I'm the only one who does those tasks. And so I'm asking that you actually increase the salary line to cover the actual hours I work.
And that increase was in the change budget or the adjusted budget, 4,300, so it comes up, the total amount, 10,974, and that includes upgraded from a, sure. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, so it's 62.8% increase, or 63%, somewhere in there.
It's what? Sorry, we're shuffling papers over here.
All right. So I have a 58.8, a 59.9, and 63 point.
Gave you the right one.
Yeah, this one says 59.9, but I think Lori just said 63 point something.
64.4, let's see.
That's the salary line, the top line.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
that's it.
got it. I was looking at the overall.
Yeah.
Not the top line. All right.
Sorry about that.
I don't actually have that paper in front of me because I'm still traveling, and I sent that electronically. I haven't been able to print anything. And so I don't actually have that sheet in front of me. But I did the math. But I just can't give you.
Wrong line.
Yeah, no,
So
that's okay.
The budget request is for, instead of for five, you know, essentially, this is because there was a reorganization in the finance department. And to figure out the salaries, the treasurer's job went from whatever, around 25 to 30 hours, went down to 5 hours. So this is Lori's tracked her hours in this period of time while it's been in its infancy. And instead of working 5 hours, she's working more like 8 hours. I just want to clarify, so that brings the budget request to 10,974 versus the previous 6,674. And that includes the raise, the pay increase, and then the adjustment to more like 8 hours a week, which is what she's actually working. But I just want to hasten to say that elected official jobs are not based on an hourly rate normally. I think it's just the fact that we're getting our sort of legs under us on dividing this work up and having, we have an assistant business manager who's taking the lion's share of those tasks. And so going forward, it's more of a set rate for elected officials, or a set salary for elected officials. And we don't normally weigh it according to hourly rates, but certainly what someone would make hourly and what that rate is informs you as a town on you know, how you're paying people and how you know, may want to pay them differently one way or another. But I do know the selectmen are looking at this, you know, the whole issue of pay of elected officials And, you know, I think we're gonna have to be a little patient on that end.
I don't know if you're looking for a decision from the Board of Selectmen, I don't know that it will change, because you'd be talking about adjusting all of the salaries.
Mhm.
And I think you heard the registrars talk about this kind of compensation affects the first selectman, the selectmen who are paid a
Mhm.
small stipend, the registrars of voters, and the treasurer. And, you know, if you really want to start looking at how many hours are made, I'm not sure you're all ready for that kind of increase based on hours. So at this point, the Board of Selectmen is not taking any additional action. This salary certainly would fall under your purview.
Mhm.
Can I-
Yeah.
Having not been around for this conversation, can I just ask, have we been tracking comparable, the assistant business manager's role? You know, did we guess at that?
That's a
That-
40
That's a question for Don, I
It's a
think.
40-hour-a-week position, so a little bit different. There are no set hours for our elected, uncompensated elected officials.
get
So
that. I'm
this
just-
was kind of a
I'm trying
guess, yeah. This was a
See if
guesstimate
there's-
of how many hours. I think 40 hours is easily the number of hours to do that job.
And if I could clarify that the treasurer really handles all the bank accounts and the reconciliation of the bank accounts. And that would be really difficult to peel off part of that, plus the fact that I think the assistant business manager puts in a full week. You know, she already has her tasks that keep her busy.
Yeah, I was
And
just wondering if we misallocate, you know, if there was a way of misallocating it
I
that, you
think,
know.
Jim, when we peeled off the hours, it was our best guess
Yeah.
at the remaining work to be done and about what that compensation would look like.
Yeah.
And so Lori's kind of giving us a little bit of a picture of it being more. But that goes to, are we paying an hourly rate, or are we just doing a flat rate stipend? And that's a little bit different a conversation. And I would encourage you to consider that model for all elected officials and not just one. But, you know, the data that Lori's presented, I think is valid, but every elected official could probably give you some similar data.
Mhm. Except I would say, in the past, it's been more of an issue of, it was a bigger job and it wasn't always clear. I mean, it wasn't, you know, there's no way that, it's not like time in the office. It's not always clear that the elected official is working anything approaching those hours, because it's up to them. And they don't really even need to be in the building. So, it kind of can work both ways as far as that goes. But the assistant business manager had non-treasurer tasks other than this.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so it's, you know, and Lori's point is part of the sort of fiduciary checks and balances that's built into this new reorganization, so. I think overall.
And if I can also add, when I was working 25 or 30 hours a week, working an extra 3 or 4 hours wasn't really a big deal. But when I'm working 5 hours a week and I'm really working 3 extra hours, that's 60% more for no pay. And again, I'm not doing it for the pay, I'm doing it to help out the town, but it does require me to be doing work for the town and reconciling accounts and, you know, chasing down checks that haven't been cashed and, you know, lots of other treasurer things. But again, we just didn't know the time it would take because it was a totally new position. And trying to estimate how much time that would be, you know, nobody really knew. So, I mean, I think Donna made a very educated guess, and I think it's just, I don't know how many people you would find that would want to work 5 hours a week but really work 8 hours a week. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Okay,
Well, what I think is important here is that this was the first year working on a guess, and now we have some reality, and we should work that reality into the number. That's as simple
That's
as that is.
okay. Lori, any other points you want to make?
No, thank you for your time and all your efforts.
Thank you. Okay. Board of Assessment Appeals, and I think Donna's standing in for Ed. Taylor on that one?
I am presenting for Ed Taylor.
He gets paid, and he can't even present his own budget.
But it's sort of a tradition.
Yes, it is sort of a tradition. So Ed Taman is the chair of the Board of Assessment Appeals. And the board is requesting an increase of $31 or 2.2%.
Oh my God, I don't think we can have that.
No, I think it's 35, right?
Yeah, because they want
For the whole thing,
$4
not just for
the
his.
clerk, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the budget consists of 3 line items. The salary line for the board, it's a board of 3-member board of elected officials, the clerk, and a line for expenses. So the
Okay.
increase is 2.75%
Okay,
in the salary.
right. Okay,
And that's the budget.
thanks, Donna.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, any questions?
No, I just want to point out that this is another elected, there's all of these elected positions, it need to be looked at, I think. If we're gonna look at one, you need to look at them all, like Erica said, because when you run for these offices and you take these positions, the salary is what the salary is. And it's not how many hours. And just like the registrars were saying, I mean, sometimes they're working way more than average. And you can't have an hourly system for it. So,
No, I understand that. I think one of the things that's different about the treasurer job is she was in the job at the higher rate when she came in, so it was.
right, she's elected though.
Right, but that's what I mean, you know,
Mhm.
like, the people are elected to the
Yeah.
other ones too,
There's a
but they,
radical change.
yeah, so that
yeah.
radical change during the midway.
But like, so the Board of Assessment Appeals, if there's a big issue like that, they have to have several more meetings,
Mhm.
they're still gonna get the same amount of money. They
Mhm.
can't come and ask for more. So,
Right,
That's all.
is it, the 2.75 they're asking for here is the
Standing rate.
the
standard.
standing,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah,
that's what I'm
you're
saying,
not
though,
questioning
like,
that, though.
but they could say they want 10% more because they had 2 extra meetings this year.
They could.
Just going out on a limb, I
Okay.
doubt it will ever exceed $600 a
No,
person
I know.
How often do
I'm
they
just
meet?
for anybody that needs clarification.
Just like 2 or 3 times a year.
2 or 3 times a year?
Barely,
Yeah.
2.
Two at
One.
least.
Mm-hmm.
I meet twice, sometimes three
Right.
times.
Okay,
I'm just saying, it's a slippery slope,
Right, I mean,
and
I'm sure
I-
it's something.
I'll use mine, right? If the most hours worked, I can easily come in and say, well, I took this job thinking maybe it was 50 hours a week. On a good budget season, that's not even close. So
yeah,
I think I've expressed some concerns about it, because whether you agree with it or not, I think you have to look at it as a whole, and not individual.
and that's it. I think all of them are under what they should be. I think that's more of what my point is.
Yes.
So,
and I'm not even sure that they've all gone up for the incremental, you know, town employee.
oh, they have.
Have they?
Yeah.
That's
They
pretty
all
much.
have, at least I can speak to my term. Mine is the only one year that did not, and the rest all went up the same increment as the CDA. So yes.
Okay. All right, conservation budget, and I have to say, I'm not sure. Got that one. Yes, I remember reading it, but I don't know that I got the paper on it.
Some of them are double standard.
Yes, on the back of the, it's on the back of the,
Yeah.
that.
It's on the back. of the
Back of this
assessment,
one, okay,
It comes in at 0%.
yes.
0% is good.
Is Kathy on?
Yep.
Oh, hi. Thank
Hi.
you.
Hi.
Welcome, Kathy.
Yeah, we're just keeping our budget request at the same level as we have for quite a few years, so no real changes in what we anticipate for the year.
Okay. Any questions on conservation? I think we're good.
All right, Thank you.
Cassie.
thanks for all you do. Okay.
And ditto. Okay. So Mike D'Amata, you have multiple budgets that you've got all neatly under one spreadsheet.
I can't take credit for that. That came from Donna.
Donna's,
So I just
You know.
filled in the numbers, but she set it up neatly. So I had a memo that I kind of put in there to kind of give you some background and an explanation. So I can go through,
about the document retention, you mean?
yes.
Mhm.
So quickly, for ZBA, economic development, and those are all being held at zero. We do have some new obligations based upon changes to state statute, which require board and commission members in sort of the land use realm to obtain training on a yearly basis. So our office is required to make sure that, like, our P and Z goes to training at least 4 hours per year, and there are specific subjects we need to attend training on. So we're gonna be handling that through the existing operating budget. So the only increase that I'm showing, which is sort of what I explained in my memo, is for the $5,000 line for document retention. You folks probably saw some of the expenditures, I would imagine, related to the work that happened in the basement with pouring of the new floor. So prior to that, we had approximately 100 boxes of land use files, which were historically kept off-site and years ago moved to the town hall. Those boxes basically fell over and were laying in the dirt for 5+ years and were destroyed by water and mold. We did our best to salvage them and obtained authorization from the state library to dispose of the documents that have been damaged, but and we've remedied the situation with the floor, and we've got some file cabinets for free from UConn. But what we have now are really degraded documents that, you know, are COs for people's houses and herb tests and well reports and things that we need to keep forever that are really important to residents that are completely uncatalogued and degraded. In some other towns, I've done this as sort of a one-stop project where we've gone for CIP and requested funds to do this all at once. We'd probably be looking at, given the volume of documents we have, between $50,000 and $75,000. So this line, the reason I'm adding it to the operating budget is because we will basically chip away at it as we go. And the idea would be to scan those documents, catalog them, they would be stored, and we would then make them available online, like a portion of our documents already are. The $5,000 comes from the fact that I'm not going to be able to really get anybody to be interested in the work if it was less, and if it was more, to me, that feels like perhaps more than we would need on an annual basis. It would take some time for us to get it done, but I think this puts us in a position where we can get a significant portion done year after year, so that this isn't something that takes, you know, a decade, but also gets enough done so that we're making substantial efforts to fix the problem. The only other thing that I would add is that when we asked the state for permission and said, hey, these documents have been damaged, there are some grant funds that are available. The town has historically obtained those funds. There was some damage to town clerk books a couple of years ago, I think. And so I asked about that, and they have these funds. It can be $5,000 a year. And their response more or less was, you should have learned by now that you need to take better care of your documents. We can't keep giving the town money for the same thing. So we did try to pursue that.
What's the oldest of these, Mike? Are they?
Right from zero. So original building records from the first documents that the land use office, building department all obtained are all, I mean, we're talking like that paper you can see through that looks like, you know, tissue,
Yeah.
right back to that. They're basically in cardboard banker's boxes, not labeled, not covered. And so when they fell over and they were laying in the dirt and then there's some water issues, they've just been completely destroyed.
Are any-
So is the guy behind you, is your heart stopping, Bob, about this?
Mine is.
Do they have any historic value?
Well, I mean, historic means different things to different people. And for the land use office, I'm sure that dates from the 70s.
Yeah, probably at least
So,
further back.
you know,
Okay.
we got
zoning in 68, so.
Right.
and, you know, you have to understand historically, or historic means different things. And the state has different regulations for different departments. So to the Historical Society, are those valuable? No, but to the town residents and for keeping town records straight for property values and such, it's very important.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'll just speak out and just say, it always seems, I've been in town for 32 years. It always seems like the town is, wait, no, we can't spend it now. And as Mike said, as the state told him, we already gave you 50 grand for your mistakes. We're not
Right,
giving you
you're not
any
gonna
more."
do it again, yeah.
So,
Does come down to a facilities issue kind of it. Thanks, Mike.
One other thing I just want to make clear is that this is not something that I think we intend to carry in perpetuity. Because it's not at the 10,000, I can't go to CIP, but when the project is done, we now take everything electronically. So we have backed into as much as we can in-house. So this is not something we'll do forever. When the project is done, it'll come off. But we tried to work with the documents, some of the staff in the office, and without getting into the details, I guess there were members, employees that in working with these documents actually had physical reactions to the mold and stuff that was
Sure.
there. So it limits what we can do in-house.
Can I just ask a question? I mean, mold grows, for example, you know, is there any, we're phasing this out every year, but as somebody who's had to dig through more than their fair share of dusty old blueprint boxes, this drives me nuts that it was like to get, you know, that it's in this condition. I just wonder if is there any danger in staging this of losing further documentation by not addressing it promptly?
So with the floor being poured in the basement, the ventilation system and the cabinets, which are elevated, we're more or less in a position now where there's good air movement. Anything that's really degraded and moldy has been removed. So we're hopeful that nothing is further being sort of destroyed or deteriorated.
We've addressed it though, so it's not, you know, we've
Yeah.
pulled bad out.
We kept them in a
Yeah.
a Connex box outside while they did the basement, and then while they went through, I think there were some that were not salvageable.
Yeah, we had
We
about
had
100 boxes total, 20
Right.
total boxes in volume speak were completely unsalvageable. So we had to get rid of those.
But, you know, I certainly have concern with putting moldy documents in the now clean basement. So we had the mold remediated and then the
That's why I
floor
asked. I mean,
poured,
this is
and now they're
5,000
back down there. But,
So,
you know, it's funding in order to do this, because our staff was willing to do some of the work, and it became very clear that just wasn't gonna be possible. The same reason you know, you saw me come before you to say, we have to do something now, because we had staff that were being affected by the mold in the building without even touching the documents, so concerning.
Okay.
It would probably be the folks that have our, where we look to is the folks that have our existing contract for the in-house copiers or whatever they typically do the best rate. We would bid it. Just solicit.
And you said you thought the whole project, get it all done in one, fell swoop would probably something like $50,000.
Probably 50, 65,000.
So, are there other questions about this or anything on? I mean, I did want to ask you, the down in where Board of Selectmen accounts are,
Mhm.
is that just missing because you guys were still working on the selectmen budgets at the bottom of his budget? There's nothing
Yeah, that's just,
carried.
those are the next items.
Yeah. It
Um,
does look like
yeah.
they're,
No,
like they're not,
that's just his, just need to look at his above. Those are included in the selectmen's budget, which you have, so
it's like a
on the-
reference point
Yes.
for,
it's just where his document stops, so pay no attention to those last two lines.
I think in
Oh, is that
like
what
in
it is?
2020 they moved. I think originally the
I think
land use
so.
attorney line, they did come out of
I think
that.
so,
And I think they moved because we both draw from that same.
yeah, so they're included in the selectmen, so they've actually been adjusted there.
And yeah, with all these things, and it's the hardest part, whether it be with revenues and permits and expenditures for legal notices, et cetera, it's so dependent upon activity. You know, if we have substantial applications, we use more attorney time and more engineer time. I don't send anything to the town engineer unless it's totally necessary because we pay for the hourly. Another thing that we're looking at is our application fees do not cover our costs. We typically lose $50 to $100 every time an application comes in, because our legal notice fees and state fees are probably $360 or more, but we're taking in 200 or so, depending on what it is, or even less. So we need to, we're sort of evaluating what those costs are, so we could perhaps have a separate conversation on making sure that we're not defraying the cost of applications with the general fund. But that's why some of these numbers look like they're all over the place, because they're so dependent on what we see.
Actually, that's one of the questions. So, I mean, it looks like, I'm sure that's the case for inland wetlands, for example. You know, those current budget items for next year don't seem to track with the need historically, but I'm sure. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether they're allocated correctly or whether there's, you know, does it honestly matter? You know, whereas we're over on education and membership, so we're projecting accurately at $600 for this next year, based on need. It was $60 last year, $1,000 before, you know. Whereas we've had zero spending on the other two line items, and are we, you know, are the numbers just allocated correctly, or is it just we swap them as needed scenario, and we think that's, I mean, $2,000 is more than what's covered yet in the prior years I have here, you know, so it's the same thing as some other.
So for part of that, I mean, the staff between Peggy and Chris, and then the commissions, they support multiple. So like Chris or the commission would go to trainings, and that would be split between, depending on, like, there's a training in March which covers wetlands, it covers ZBA stuff, P&Z stuff. So we try to split those resources. And then for advertising, you know, we really don't need much of that because they do not have a lot of hearings, but we're about $125 or so every time we put a notice in the paper. So for P&Z, that means every application is 3 notices. Wetlands is only 1 if we don't have a hearing. So again, it's a little bit fluctuating, and then those trainings cover the commission members if they go to those trainings, which, as I said, the statutes have changed. There's some obligations that didn't exist prior to last year. So it's a little bit hard because that does fluctuate. We are also at 4 members down on our wetlands commission. I think we have 3 members. I think we need 7 with alternates. So if we actually filled that board out, we may have sort of an increase to what we've seen historically, but the board has been down 3 members or more since 2018. So those numbers kind of support the totality of what we might see if we ended up with that.
Your cover letter just notes that zoning board of appeals was flat, but there is an increase there. I just want to make sure, since we've had some, I want to make sure we have the right data, since we've had a couple of replacements in the 11th hour.
Yeah, so that comes, so the ZBA clerk is split between the planning and zoning secretary salary, a portion of that, because she does the minutes and all the clerking. So those numbers are zeros when I send them out, because I don't have control over the salary lines.
Mm-hmm.
So those are adjusted by others.
That's a union employee.
Okay.
So 1 hour of her week is dedicated to ZBA, and that's how her job is broken out between the 2 boards. So that's why I see an increase there.
Yep.
And we moved the recording secretary for P&Z in-house to the assistant land use position 2 years ago. So we don't have a recording secretary line because that's done in-house, so there's no cost there.
why is there a 7.5% increase in the assistant land use agents?
So that union employee has a step increase.
Oh, and that's the first 3 years or something?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes,
thanks.
Is a step plus the 2.75.
yes. And in case you're curious, the secretary position under that has a 3.2% increase because she is reaching a longevity milestone that's causing her salary to increase more than 2.75.
Thanks.
And those are both full-time.
Full-time,
Equivalent
35 hours,
positions.
yes.
The land use consulting services, that's you, right? Mike?
That's me.
That hasn't changed in years. What is the commitment there contractually? I think, what is it? I guess what I'm asking is, we inherited this, so this is a contract when Tyke contract with the town, we inherited this from CME and then CHA prior.
It's changed since we originally started, but it was carried over, but it's an annual contract.
So that's an annual, it's,
It's
so
the
you,
same service, new.
same service, new, yeah, so it's been carried for quite some time. That is, what is, so that's a 1 day a week in office commitment and meetings, correct?
I can tell you from the town's perspective, there's not been a time I haven't reached out to Mike, outside of that 1 day a week where we haven't had response and Mike hasn't, done work for the town. So it's more than just 1 day a week in-house.
I get that, I mean, as somebody who
Yeah.
comes from a position who doesn't take regular office hours in any way, shape or form, and has to be, I understand
Yeah.
that. I'm just wondering, knowing that it just seems like a big expense for a 20% full-time equivalent
So
workload is what I'm asking. And have we explored, since we've just renewed contracts for 5 years, other alternatives? Because I know comparable
so the
salaries, comparable, not salaries, but salaries for comparable services as a full-time equivalent would not be anywhere near a $210,000
No, I
salary
mean,
for
we
full-time.
would, 42,000 is nothing. We would have somebody here every day. We have an employee. Until this past November, this was a union position.
Yeah.
And we had an MOU with the union to allow us outside. When our previous land use agent left, it was very challenging to find someone within the mediocre at best salary that we were offering when the going rate at that time, and this was 2018, when the going rate was probably closer to 90,000, we were offering somewhere around 53,000. You get what you pay for.
No, I get
And
that, but I'm
so
wondering, I
we've been
mean,
able to get a comparable service, and we increase the hours of the assistants.
that's my next
to full-
question.
We
have
increased that, that was
assistants.
not a full-time position when I started here, and so we've increased that to a full-time position to have coverage in the office on the days when the land use agent was not here.
And I get that, but the land use agent isn't here for 4 days a week, right?
No, so
So-
the assistant land
The
use agent is
assistant,
here
yes.
5 days, and that was,
So we covered that, but we haven't, so with now an assistant land use agent here full-time, we haven't seen any reduction in consulting hours for this, I guess, is
Yeah.
just.
So I
We
reduced
have
my contract by
over 5
$6,000
yes.
to have a net zero increase in the land use budget to make the assistant land use agent full-time. And then we took the benefits that were structured for this position, moved them to the assistant land use agent so that that position could be full-time with benefits for a zero net increase to the town. My original
When did that
contract with the
happen?
town,
Because your contract with the town's been 42,000 for.
prior to
3
that, it
years
was
No,
48.
prior to that, it was more. The initial contract was.
With CME and CHA.
Right, it was the same two individuals,
I get that, but
yes.
What year was that, was 48?
I think it would have been 2019,
2019.
we reduced it. So there was no reduction in the hours provided to the town.
Just the
Um,
cost of
still
the
the-
contract,
But
it's
it's
still the 1 day a week commitment,
at minimum.
at minimum.
There
Yeah,
have been,
but I mean,
there have been
we're a
other
small town, we
days.
don't have a big, we've had one big application. I only question this because, your cover letter notes that you had one application, and I know it was a big one, but one application slowed the zoning, planning and zoning's ability to, follow other initiatives. Yet with an assistant land use agent now full-time, with other full-time staff, I'm just questioning whether we need to explore other opportunities
But we
for
need,
getting
we
you
need
know.
a certified land use agent, so
I get
someone
that.
who's certified. and
Have
I'm
we
not
gone out
sure.
for RFP or anything since in
No.
5 years? I
No.
just think it might be worth looking at that. I know
I-
Mike's, I know.
I can tell you I've been satisfied with the services that have been
No,
provided.
he's
to us.
very confident. I just think
Yes.
it's a premium for what is there. And I think, I know, quite frankly, I know you cover a lot of the other neighboring towns too. So there's a limiting factor in what we can and can't negotiate for shared services with other towns. If we don't need, I mean, we're a small town, we don't need a full-time, we don't need a full-time land use agent. We don't. And I understand that's hard, but I feel like there's an opportunity for second there. I'm not discounting your work ethic. I'm not discounting your position, Mike. I just think it's a relationship that seems very high to me from a cost perspective. Particularly when economic development is in there as well. And that's another question I got for you. There's a $23,000 line item here, but I don't believe that's your consulting fee from,
That's
it's
that's
not
all in-
23, right?
there's other things in there. They have
What is that
general
breakdown?
expenses. They have also, I
Why
think
is
they had
that?
it last year, a $4,000 or $5,000 request because the town is going through a signage project.
Yeah.
So they want to install signs at various gateway points.
Can we just get further breakdown on that? Because I know, on what that is, because we seem to have broken out every other thing, but economic development is just flat.
So economic development, the budget line has been one line for as long as I've seen it, but it involves, so our contract through basically John's support of the commission, I thought it was $4,500. I can't remember the exact number that was added last year for signage.
Okay,
And
how long is that going? Like, that's what I'm trying
it's
to
to
say.
purchase sign, it's to purchase a physical sign.
I would hope that they would have done it this year, but
But we had-
And
okay.
what's the fee part of that? 23,000?
So that includes all of their expenditures. So
You're
the-
18 now, right?
You're 18.
You're 18.
the contract with Tai Chi, you mean?
Yeah.
That's for,
Random sidebar, it's Taiki, right?
It's Taiki.
I know, it's hard to pronounce it. I've heard it 50 different ways. I just wanted to make sure I was doing it.
I guess the only other thing that I would note, and if the town feels that going out to bid for consulting services on a part-time basis is the right thing to do, I mean, that's certainly.
I don't know if it is. I just think we need, that's a discussion that needs to be had because it's been 5 years and, when we're shooting.
Needless to say, I'm not surprised at the conversation, but what I would say is there are other people that provide similar consulting or hourly based services that don't provide office hours to town hall, period. So I commit on a weekly basis to making sure that I'm physically here one full day, and then everything else is as needed. I'm attending this meeting, whether a planning and zoning meeting is 30 minutes or 5 hours, I'm there. I don't bill mileage, I don't bill any of those things, it's a flat budget. You want to go to some other structure, you probably also need to think about benefits, which are probably $25,000 a year. As someone who has employees that work for me, it costs me about that. I came to the town because they were unable to find the position for the money that they had budgeted, and went through that process. It was sort of competitively selected. And we don't do 2% increases like you would see with a salary. We feel very confident that we're providing a high level of service, and I'm confident that there isn't another service that provides what we provide. There's simply no one else providing consulting planning work in Connecticut.
So
We're in 25 towns, and that's not.
in conversations with multiple of my peers, other municipal CEOs, whether that be first select people, mayors, or town managers, town administrators, all find ourselves in the same position of not being able to fill these roles within the budget. And many of those conversations have turned to others utilizing the similar services that we do, because they can't find anything for less. The bank or a buck
Something like you said, it's in 25 towns. I get the
Yeah.
need
I'm not in
for it.
25 towns, but we have 5 employees
Correct.
and we're in towns in varying capacities. The other thing that I guess,
Because my counterparts out there have not been able to find individuals or other companies to work within our budgets. So I will.
the other thing that I want to note is that the application and the reference in my memo was not, we had one application, so therefore we were so bogged down in one application, we couldn't get things done. It was based upon the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission is made up of a group of volunteers and running through text amendments, affordable housing plans, POCD implementation, and all the other things that we would typically do while they're sitting in a public hearing for 4 hours seemed like a lot. So we put a lot of things on pause, recognizing that they were human beings. And so we didn't get as much done as we might want to. And, you know, we put our foot on the gas pretty firmly otherwise. So it was not because of a staff horsepower problem. I would also note that the original agreement that Erica mentioned with the MOU was basically, I'm here as a function of training the assistant land use agent who was out of college and had no experience. The understanding is that providing that shadowing and that mechanism for them to obtain the experience that they wouldn't normally, put them in a position to further their career aspiration, what they might want to do in-house. So that was part of what was agreed to by the union, but based upon the understanding that it provided an opportunity for the assistant land use agent. That position previously was paying for benefits out of pocket, which was several $100s a month. So when I reduced my contract and we added those health benefits to that person, they now have the ability to learn closer to a living wage and receive health benefits while working full-time, which is what has made it possible for us to actually fill the position. So there's a lot more to it than let's shore up the people that are in the office to make up for the guy who's only here 1 day a week.
No, I understand that completely. Mentorship is important for any professional, you know, industry. And that's, I'm sure Chris appreciates that 100%. You know, just given that this has been an ongoing, you know, 5-year relationship, and I don't know what the market is out there for certified land use planners or whatever the case may be. It just feels like an opportunity for consideration. Can I just ask one last question? Because your contract, is it a not to exceed contract or is it a fixed fee contract?
We budget a flat rate per month. We do not.
You do, but it says it's fixed fee basis, the total billing not to exceed 42,000
Okay.
and 18,000. If it's a not to exceed fee, what happens is there's no variation in billing or
We bill a flat rate per month.
for a not to exceed fee.
So the total cost, and part of it will depend on when the contract started, but it runs through basically through fiscal. So we bill a flat rate per month. There's no provisions for us to bill anything other than that. We don't.
I get that. I'm just, it has a not to exceed contract. When planning and zoning or zoning board of appeals doesn't have a meeting for 6 months. Or economic development commission who has 4 people and hasn't met once in the past 4 months. For both of those contracts, for the Tyke's relationship with economic development and planning and zoning, if there's no movement over 3 months, there's no reduction in services or billable hours for a consultant, not a paid employee, but a consulting service for a not to exceed fee. If there's less work, there is conceptually less billing.
So that's why the contract is structured to be flat with hours in-house, period.
Yeah.
So it's not based upon the work. We're not an attorney. We don't bill, because that's why you have some years where you spend 2,000 and some years where you spend 8,000. From a budgetary perspective, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
But
So
economic
we
development
structure
commission doesn't
by
have
If
to
this were a
say.
salaried position, we would be paying that person whether they went to EDC 1 time or they went to EDC 12 times.
I get that. EDC doesn't
So-
have a fixed office hours though.
Right, but
So that-
ZBA,
it's the same
I mean, all of
thing.
these are the same, they would be.
They're not the same.
A
They're
salaried
different
employee would be paid the same.
If
whether
he's
they
not a
attend-
salaried, if they're not a salaried employee, they're. a
Our
consultant.
choices are a salaried employee
Correct.
or a contracted fee.
Correct.
So,
And a salaried employee would be there on a salaried position, you know, for a salary basis.
Which is why our contract is structured to guarantee that we provide a minimum 1 full day per week. So we don't bill what, if we have one meeting or 100 meetings, if they're 1 hour or 100 hours, there's no change in cost to the town. So we want to make sure that there's a minimum that's being provided, and then anything we do beyond that doesn't create an additional budgetary constraint for the town.
I just got the look from Erica, the staff that I'm gonna be shut off. So, for zoning reg revision projects, can you just fill me in on the $1,500 that hasn't been used for the past 3 years? And I know they're trying to get to it this year.
Yeah.
There's a $1,500 line item that has zeroed out for,
So part of that, so that's an existing line that has been there prior to 2018. And that I think is related to legal expenses related to regulation revisions. And part of it was, we weren't doing many updates through COVID.
yeah.
But also you'd see, typically what we run for the commissioners, we're getting ready to do it now, is we also, reprint and bind the regs, the 365 pages. So there's some costs associated with providing that documentation. So we don't have the expenditures because we haven't, and there's not a glorified answer as to
No, that's
why
fine.
it wasn't done.
I'm just curious. I was just curious what the placeholder was for, because I know you guys are envisioning a zoning regulation update, forthcoming. And I was just wondering if that's something that we're just carrying as a miscellaneous, buffer, or whether that's something that's gonna be adjusted. All right, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'll
because
shut up
a
now.
year
Thank
and a
you.
half ago.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the feedback.
Thanks, Jim. A year and a half ago, we adjusted it upwards. Right? From 1,500 to 5,500?
No, it's
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
We're on like.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm on the wrong line.
Yeah, sorry, I should have specified line 402.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
We're on the Economic Development Commission too. Is that you too, Mike?
Mhm.
are we gonna move on to that, or are we?
No,
No, it's all a part of this
No,
budget. It's the same.
We've been talking about
Yeah, I
that.
talked with there was a conflict with, when we lost Rick, we don't have a chair, and so there was some conflict with someone from the commission being able to represent it, because it was a flat budget, and I was gonna be here.
No, I just have a question, and if you can answer it, that would be
I'll
great.
do
If
my
you can't,
best.
That would be, that's a great.
Do my best.
So last year we budgeted $23,000 and $7,000 got spent. Are we gonna spend the rest of that sometime in the second half of this year and it's just not reflected yet? Or is that why you're asking for 23,000 again for next year so that we can actually do the project that didn't get spent?
So, yeah, a portion of that is our support to the commission and the work, like with the small business. We did $230,000 of small business grants through ARPA, so like administration of those projects. I think a $5,000 increase from which hit initially last year is for the sign project. So the commission, we did some outreach to get some feedback from the residents about what types of signs were preferred, where it made sense. We've got some ideas about what the signs are gonna need to look like, so we wanna do some outreach to get some prices. And then we need to do some work with DOT potentially about where. So I suspect nearly all of that will go because it's either budgeted or soon to be expended.
Well, 18 if it is Tyke, right? So it's a not to exceed again. There's only 5,000 there that's not to exceed contract for consulting.
Which is the signage.
Yeah, which is signage, which hopefully will be.
So you're saying that the ARPA oversight of those business loans fell to your position with EDC?
Well, not mine, but my partner, John. So any of the initiatives, just like a staff person would, the commission doesn't have staff or an office, would be done through John. So any of the strategic planning stuff they're working on now, the business grants.
All right, wait a minute, you're losing, I lost the thread of my question someplace. We budgeted 23,000, we spent 7,000. Why didn't we spend 23,000?
That's only through December.
Because it,
And that was my question, is that only through December? Now we're gonna spend the rest of it
between December and June.
Correct. The expectation is about July 1. you'll be
Right.
good.
There we go.
Between
That
December
answers the
and now,
question.
Yeah,
it's more
because
than
I'm
the-
done. I can move on.
When he was, because the contract is for 17.5.
Yeah.
It's already more than 75, you just don't see that.
Okay. Okay, did you?
Who is on EDC now?
We have Matt Clark,
Mhm.
we have Bill Rankin, Sam Hills, and Cheryl Mitchell.
And none of them are the chair.
So a little unexpectedly, Rick Maloney resigned, and they've had discussions at the past subsequent meetings. Matt is sort of interim chair, but no one is really sure that they want to take the commitment on.
So who is overseeing it then? So like, this is an $18,000 a year expense that really no one is overseeing, except for you, who is.
So I don't oversee the expenses, I don't look at any of the money. So Matt is interim chair and everything basically happens at the meetings.
Mhm.
I don't know on the finance side, I think they're going to Matt or probably to you.
It should be Matt, so,
Yeah.
you know, I would
It's not to me.
encourage you to reach out to that commissioner and have him come forward to speak to it.
Yeah,
So, because they are essentially responsible for that.
well, I mean, maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago, the EDC budget was like $1,000.
Yeah.
And they would come and ask for an extra 500 to do a postcard mailing or something. That's how it was, and then there was the pitch to implement this, to like really elevate it, and I think it has been, but if no one is really driving the ship right now,
Right.
then I don't know why we're spending $18,000 a year on it.
And so I know originally they were using advanced CT, and then that partnership ended when they began doing work for the state. And that's when they brought John Miskowski on board. And so I know they have some things that they're looking to do, but it is very discouraging that when one person from the commission steps down, the rest kind of aren't picking up their weight, and it's their responsibility.
Barbara Chair, are you concerned about oversight of all those business loans? I mean, not loans, business gifts and donations.
I mean, I wasn't.
But
That part's
Maybe
done.
I am.
Sorry.
So I think that part was something that they were working on, right? So that was more on that end. It's what do they plan to do with the funds of the services that they have procured for this year?
Mhm.
And it's not the consultants that we've hired, it's what are our commissioners planning to do with that work? And that's where I'm more concerned about, like, if they're, I think, doing their part, and I won't say they, because Mike doesn't provide service to them, it's John. If that's all that's driving this, where's the responsibility of our commission? And whether he's permanent or not, he's taken the seat of interim chair and should be responsible to that, so.
Mhm.
Okay, Phil's been patient. Thank you, Mike.
Sure, thank you, man.
I just said this is the third year where we've had a snow call in the morning at 4 AM.
What snow?
So we have to get up to try and figure out if we're gonna have any delays or anything,
No,
so,
don't do that. to me.
Well,
Get the kids.
yeah, no, this is.
No,
but,
He's tired.
uh,
He's staying away.
So,
That's Tuesday.
We'll try to make it as pain-free as possible.
I will as well. Tim, can I share my screen?
I made it so multiple people could share it.
Beautiful, thank you so much.
Just for you, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
We used to get it real quick.
You got
Oh, you
it.
got it on email. Yeah.
You not look at that?
You have to give it back because that's.
Yeah.
Not for nothing, but we have to give it to you a week before.
as long as we have it, that's all I just wanted to.
No, you guys
It's
don't
online.
have it on
Yeah,
email.
you know,
It's
I use
32 pages.
Be color binded, I guess I applaud you for saving some money there.
There you go.
accidentally printed 1.5 copies before I,
Realize that was-
so if anyone else wants to look at a paper copy.
Phil, you said the last.
only
few
9
years
of
we
them.
have it.
I don't think ever in my time you've gotten a paper copy from me.
Yeah, we have.
Not from Phil.
Not for me. If someone did it, I don't know who did it. last year, I think when I presented, you guys had not seen it, even though it was emailed.
Before the world shut down, you were the superintendent. We used to get a real thing like that.
So
Yeah,
I'm
but
sure you
yeah,
did it.
That might have been, that
He's
was when
saying it
that
might
was
have
when
been-
Jackie Jacoby, like.
No.
I think
She had it in
From
binders.
Mike
your
did it.
board, it was provided, he did not provide you copies, is what he said. You got it, but it didn't come from the superintendent, a printing,
You
physical
want
printing didn't come from him.
Maybe we could go back.
Well, we
to
got
the way
it.
you
That's
used
all I'm
to
saying.
do it.
I don't know how you got it.
Somebody.
You got it a week ago, it's your responsibility to look at it.
I know.
Yeah, but I mean,
You looked at it.
he's just right that it's pretty hard to take it all in online,
Yeah.
you know,
So,
so, and I did ask about it, Jeff, sorry, I kind of failed on that one. I said, hey, I'm new, where do we get?
I just
this
always
budget?"
assumed it came through you.
That's okay.
Okay, but nevertheless, let's go
let's
with,
go on.
let's go with your top of,
Okay, so,
top level,
we have, I think, a pretty reasonable budget for you tonight. The board worked hard on trying to provide something, especially now, that's reasonable. The increase is on slide one. You're gonna see a couple changes in your, from your presentation that you have right there to the last slide. So, because as you know, this is constantly changing, and we have changes as of yesterday. And it's good news. So more good news is a good thing. So the increase of 89,000 is actually going to be less on the last slide. You do not have that on your paperwork. But it's a reasonable budget under 1%. We always put the board goals, and this is the Board of Ed district framework in part of this package, because it's important to know that when we write goals and we have these, you know, the beliefs tied to everything we do is tied to dollars. And so when we say we need X number of dollars for something, you can tie it to a goal. And I just think it's important. You can reference back to this. You know, we're looking at books. It's tied back to student growth and success. It's tied to, you know, any of the goals, or it's tied to one of those things to dollars. So the overall assumptions as we have every year, insurance this year was a big hit, but it turns out to be not a big hit because the folks that had left the district within the last year and the folks that came in, you know, when someone's taking family insurance and it's close to $30,000, and then the new person that comes in waives insurance, it's a huge savings. And you're gonna see that actually how much money we're thinking is gonna be coming back to the town. It's a lot, because we had a very, very good year from a health insurance perspective, currently. So even though there's a 7.5% increase, and no more than 3% for dental, I think insurance overall is actually a decrease. I saw an email today that went, a local superintendent that had a 30% increase. So insurance is one of those killers right now that districts are trying to figure out how to handle. The thing that's in yellow on your screen here, up here on the TV, is the new information. We just locked in fuel prices. We had what we believed, well, I think it was 317 and 327, 319, and now we're at 293 and 303. So that's, we had budgeted for a higher number, and now that we've locked in, which is slightly above where we were for one of them, and slightly below from this year, it's decent. So there's some savings there, and we'll talk about that at the end. Yeah, that is good news. Electric rates decreased a little bit. We do have 2 outplacements for special education. It's important to know, you were talking early on, sometimes you don't know things. If someone moves in tomorrow that's identified with special education needs and they're in an outplacement setting, we're footing the bill for them. So that could be $150,000 swing really fast. We are planning for 2 right now that we know. We don't put any placeholders in for outplacements. That's how we use the non-option fund. That's not in the budget. Some districts put in a placeholder that are just in case. We don't believe that's the right move. So it's the 2 is the actual. There is a contractual transportation cost of $40,000 increase this year. We had some of that offset in the current year. Our contract is still significantly lower than pretty much everybody around us. And when we share our contract rate, even though we have that significant increase, other people look at our contract and say, how did you do that? Because we're lower than the many districts around us. And then it's important, you talked about unfunded mandates earlier. There's many of them. I took that slide off this year. I think you've heard that. You know, there's another example tonight talking about legislation in a different group. It's the same concept. Things come forward and you got to adjust and figure out. And sometimes there's dollars with it and sometimes there's not.
What percentage is that 40K increase in transportation? About, you know?
I'd have to go back to it. It's probably 10% over last year, I bet. We've kind of filtered it in, like last year we prepaid a little bit to try and offset this year, and this year we knew it was gonna be a bigger hit. But it's still significantly lower than others.
I'm trying.
The other piece that we always think is important, I think, I don't know if it's just this perception that there's a lot of fluff in a big budget, and there's no fluff in this budget. If you look at what is contractual, you could argue maybe you don't need an M-Corps to pay for preventative maintenance. You could take those things out. It is a contract, but maybe you don't need it. Someone could argue that. I would say they're wrong. But those are fixed costs and they increase. And so, your contracts that are through your unions have increases in them. When you have benefits, if we have to go out to bid, it's the number's the number, and you have to pay those things. Purchase services, those things that are contracts for our students, we're required to have a student information system so we can report out to the state. That's a fixed cost. It's a contract that we have to have. Things like IT. What I tell people we spend on IT between the town and the Board of Education, other people have 5 and 6 people in their departments and they're spending $500,000, and we spend less than half of that. We're in the $200,000 range for what I call an army. It's been fantastic for us. So thinking about a $9 million budget and what's contractual, it's almost all of it is contractual. The things that are not, and this is kind of amusing, I think, from my perspective, is the 3% is the supplies. It's the paper, it's the pencils, it's, those types of things, it's the books. So if you're talking about cutting things in a Board of Education budget when it's not contractual, that's what you're attacking. And it's such a small portion of the budget. It's really minuscule.
Well, their books were cut out in center, weren't they? For the book budget?
No.
Oh, was it?
Reading textbooks, there's
No, it went to a different line. It looks
Okay.
like there might be a cut, but we just moved it to a different line.
Okay.
Yeah, we put it into, because reading textbooks was a line and we moved, it's not a textbook. We just felt like reading materials, supplies was a better place to put it.
Okay.
So there was no cut there. Yeah. The next slide here, what are the increases? So, you're at the grocery store, everywhere you go, the supplies have increased, curriculum materials have increased some, purchase services that have some increases. The big things we can point to for the Board of Ed, transportation was about $47,000. It's a big hit. And then utilities was about $20,000. And so the utilities was trued up a little bit from actual use. So we look at the bills and we go, hey, this is what we're actually using. That's what we're budgeting. And you're going to hear the same thing about fuel. What are the savings? This is honestly a weird, I never get to say this is savings. This is weird. It's to put insurance as a savings. It's almost unheard of. It just happens to be the pool of people we have that we've hired over the last year waived insurance. And so we're even despite the increase, we're seeing savings there. Staff contracts, the savings, again, some of the folks that left, if you left and you're on top step making $80,000 and we hired somebody new, it just happened to be that the best candidate came in at 60. There's savings there. So add the savings from the salary and the savings from the benefits, it's significant money. It's what's allowed us to present an under 1% budget. Yeah.
How many positions are we looking to fill currently? Do we have any positions?
Well, I think I have a para opening right now. I don't think there's a speech and language opening right now. But
So a handful that won't have any.
they're small. Yeah, there are certain districts, Jim, that, to be honest with you, they have 50+ openings. I don't even want to say it out loud, but we've been lucky to find the wood for me to knock on. We've done a good job filling our positions and finding people that want to come and work in Wellington. Obviously, the application and grants, it's another slide that's significant. It's over $500,000 we apply in grants. I will tell you that there's some superintendents and boards of education that tuck that away and they don't share that information with town members and they just kind of apply things as they want. We put that out there for you. If we ever to lose those grants, your budget's going up $500,000. It's a lot of money. And we typically offset every dollar in those grants. Some of them have crept down, but for the most part, every single dollar is an offset in your budget for different things. And obviously shared services we've talked about every year, with the town. So the next slide there is just the snapshot from it's from the budget. It's all the grants, $673,000 that is to offset the budget this year. Some of it's clubs, some of it's people. There's some non-lapsing funds in there that we're anticipating applying. It's professional development, it's technology, and it says what it's applied to in each of the spots in the full document. So the intent here is to show you it's a lot of money that we're offsetting the budget with. The enrollment, I think we're actually at 407 as of today. So this is October 1 is when we report to the state each year. So we try and give you that number. But we're at 407 as of today. I don't know what kindergarten's gonna look like. Those are still creeping in for next year. We've planned for 3 because that's what we hit this year. Three sections, 3 teachers. Yeah. We had to hire.
That was 3% increase, 3 students.
No, sorry.
I needed
3 kindergarten classes.
My apologies. The next slide is just a reminder, and there's a big number on the bottom of that slide. This is the transparency. This is we have returned money. We don't go on the spending sprees. We make sure if we do spend money, like last year when we spent some money on security cameras, things like that, it's very public. It's approved by the board. I'm not just going out and doing things. Those things are done very publicly if there's, line items left over. So we anticipate this year, because we have huge savings, over $300,000 in the health insurance line right now. We anticipate we're going to be returning some big funds to you this year. I will tell you that the Board of Ed has $150,000 offset from the non-lapsing fund in this budget that is applying. I can flat out tell you of the money that they expect to return this year, they're going to ask you for the $150,000 back to make sure that non-lapsing fund stays close to max so we can use it. And I think it's been used very, very wisely by the Board of Education. 1, an outplacement, that's where you can get it from. Second, when we had an enrollment bump this year, we hired a kindergarten teacher without coming back to you. We utilized non-lapsing funds to pay for that kindergarten teacher. It's an unexpected expenditure that we need. That's what that fund is for. It doesn't impact your MBR. I can't just spend that money. It's got to go through the Board of Education. So yes, there's a big pot of money sitting there right now that we're processing through. Donna and I think we've met more this year because we're trying to make sure we have a good picture earlier this year so we can guarantee what we're going to return. But I think it's very safe to say that you're going to be able to apply as a Board of Finance at least $125,000 that you're going to get that back. That would be general funds that you could apply to the overall budget next year. That's a safe number that we feel confident in saying.
It might be dense here, the anticipated return of 375,000, but
add
50 plus 125.
Add the 150. It's just trying to look at all the numbers.
So the math would be 225, but you're saying a minimum of 125.
Correct. And again, it's anticipated right now. Jim, I could have somebody move in tomorrow. We're looking at, I think we may have close to $900,000 in the budget right now, which is a lot of money for this time of year. Over 300,000. So as we apply grants and we're trying to make those adjustments, again, I don't know what the number is. The point for us is, I can't guarantee you, to be honest with you, until July, whatever, October, until all the books are settled. But I don't think we've ever come out and said, we're going to tell you what we guarantee $125,000 back. No.
The board had a conscious conversation about whether or not we should apply that $150,000 out of the non-lapsing account or not, and give you a higher budget based on keeping that money where it was. But the board consciously said that we know it's gonna be tight in some of the other departments. We wanted to show you that, you know, we realized that we haven't needed it so far this year. And, you know, the fact that it's mid-February, we felt comfortable applying it to this year's budget. But know that we will be coming back and asking you to use some of the funds that we return to fill that back up. That is the only contingency fund we have. We don't put placeholders in there for outplacement, you know, and you don't want us coming back all the time and asking for the additional pieces we need. It saves you time and energy. And that's why it was set up that way. So that was the anticipation, was so that we could, since we knew ahead of time that there was savings, we wanted to be able to tell you ahead of time that there were going to be savings, and then apply this to that so that you can see, actually take that into account when you're doing this year's budget.
What is the cap on the non-lapsing? It's like 3% of budget.
It's a max of 2% and it's of the current budget number.
Yes.
That's the most you can put in there. They increased it from 1% to 2%. And yes.
There is still a little bit left in there, so
yeah,
it's
there's
not,
still money in there.
yeah, that's not the full amount that was in there.
The $100,000 in that window, that your math is not wrong. It's just a buffer for us where I don't want to say we're guaranteeing X number and then can't deliver on it. Because it puts
I'm in learning mode.
you in a really tough process. Thank you. So here's the final slide is the update. And so you don't have this. So we calculated the savings off of diesel for transportation, and we calculated the savings off of heating fuel. And so there's a $13,000 savings. And so just talking to Donna today, and I think Erica's probably gonna be in a similar boat because we do fuel together, that you could safely take $13,000 off a Board of Ed approved budget number. She's okay to have, since Michelle's the chair. Again, this is about transparency. There's not fluff in here. This is what we expect to use for fuel and heating oil. And so you would be down to a 0.85% increase, and your new number would be 9,150,1,473. So without going through all the programs of the budget that Jeff was talking about, it's just kind of a high level picture of the Board of Ed budget and where it's at.
And how many?
So the percentage increase is
0.85 if you take that 13,000 off. I did that number today, so that's somebody check my math.
After getting a good 4 AM, the likelihood of math errors increases.
It's not for the 13,000, after that. it's only-
Yeah.
How many pages is the total budget if I decide to?
It's like
36,
32,
oh,
33.
35, 36, yeah.
Print it back to back.
Yeah.
I,
Save
yeah,
a tree.
yeah, I got it.
It's online too, but you can email to you, however you want to look at it.
I have two questions, and I'm not sure if they're budget related, but maybe you could answer them.
Yep.
You said you had more kindergartners than you expected.
This year.
So does that raise our total student base to what? 390 something or?
So we're at like 406 as of today.
406?
Yep.
See how close I was?
The problem is always around, you want to have the smaller class sizes for the youngest grades. So having you know, if you have a class of 45 kids, you
Right.
divide them across 3 classes of 15. But you can't always tell how many kids are coming in because they register
Right.
when they move in or when they feel like it, or the day before classes start, if you're lucky, and not the day of classes. So there's always the last minute surprises. So based on how many people had registered early last year, we estimated that it was gonna be a light year, and we budgeted for 2.
Okay.
And then surprise, everybody decided, oh, I think we're sending our kid to kindergarten this year. So we had a higher number and decided we had to split it into a 3rd class to fill that. But we didn't come back to you. We used the non-lapsing fund for that purpose. That's what those surprises were.
That fully answers that question. The other one's transportation related. I know that the town of Mansfield, they had a bus driver call out sick. They just called up everybody on their route and told the parents to drive them in. Are we having that same issue?
So I won't let them do that. And I disagree with that practice. They have an obligation to transport. So our bus drivers have been great. They're merging routes. And so we're not leaving people stuck where they have to drive their students in. It is, sometimes it causes delays for sure.
Okay,
But we
so
also.
they don't have to substitute drivers for us either, we just do it
It's
different.
it's a problem statewide, nationwide.
All right.
We do get credited when we are down the bus though.
Oh, good.
Then we track that.
Yeah.
So Phil, on the books, like, so I was looking under the reading books, which doesn't, it has had 2,600, doesn't have anything. But you went up in the subscriptions, math, science, reading, is that where that went to? You went up,
Which program are you looking at?
oh, actually, that's only compared to a half year spending. Oh, no, it says approved.
It's probably in, so I'll give you the
I'm
example of
looking
program one.
looking at the request, I'm looking at 22-23 for subscriptions, you're at 4760.
Program two.
No, you just passed it.
I'm sorry, page
No, it's not
9.
there.
But at the top of the page, it's on the program.
So approved. You
I'm
just
sorry?
passed it.
They're by program.
Right there.
Oh,
4760.
it's, no, again.
So for
page
center
number.
school,
That's not it though. That's a subscription, so that's like,
Okay.
that's, you know, if there's an online subscription for, something for science, it falls into that as an online subscription. Those are all purchase services, where you're gonna see the changes, if you go to educational supplies, look at the jump in educational supplies in that same program. It went from 39,641
Mhm,
to 50,453.
yeah.
That was a more appropriate place to put, because we don't
Okay.
have textbooks per se, like people think textbooks, the old school textbook, we don't have those. We do have reading, we do have math ones but we're buying them out of supplies because it's not really a textbook, it's a workbook, it's a supply. And so that's where we move those items to.
Okay. And then, you cut in half the utility support staff, is that an opening or is that? I think it's up on that
It
same
was
page.
2 fully funded by a grant, and now it is 1 funded by budget.
Okay,
Unless we have funds left from COVID grants, which that's why we're working on budget now. Those COVID funds expire. We have 1 more year on some of those dollars. And I'm still waiting for an answer on the state about there's a question about liquidation. If you encumber something by September 30th, can you use those funds through January 30th of, I believe it's 2025? And I've not got an answer on that. So I'm waiting on that, because if there's leftover funds, we're going to use every dollar of our COVID funds somehow, whether it's cleaning supplies, nurses supplies, instructional support, and that utility position, things like that.
okay. So from 21-22 at center, it says for building, for maintenance, that you went from, it was like 76,000 and now it's like 31,000.
So good question. So no, I'm not taking care of the buildings.
I know you
I
are.
did not cut $50,000 from the budget. That was an adjustment where we did a project. So when we do some sort of project, and then this is a prime example of using end of the year funds, I'm gonna say that was an end of the year funds project, and it's escaping me of what it was. 21, 22, nope, that was CIP, that's why they didn't mix in. But there was something that was applied into that maintenance, those maintenance lines. That was a big project that we knocked off, and it gets adjusted, and Donna makes that adjustment in the budget. So it was probably around 28,000, and then we did a $50,000 project. So when it's adjusted, it goes up to 76, sorry.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
So, in the hall, grades 5 through 8, under purchase services, and that's where some of your increase came in, I know, but, so basically jumped from the current fiscal year,
Yeah, I can explain it.
like times 10.
Yeah, so this is a question that Jim had earlier. What are you missing for staff? There is a significant shortage for world language teachers. It doesn't matter what language it is. There's a significant shortage for it. People can't find teachers. And so we ended up trying to take a creative route. We actually are using Rosetta Stone, and that's a purchase service. And so this year we're using basically an instructional paraprofessional in that room to oversee the implementation of Rosetta Stone. Every student's on a headset. They can pick from 5 different languages depending on the grade level. It is working very, very well. It's been very successful. And so, I mean, if you go into the world language job search, you can pick where you want to work. And so we stopped the revolving door and said we needed a better solution, and this has worked very well. The kids have mics, headset with a microphone. We have a part-time language teacher at the elementary school, but that money, so in the salary line, there's no salary for now a world language teacher at the middle school. There's a decrease there, but there's an increase in the cost of the purchase service.
Gotcha.
And that program is literally about the difference between the 1,200 and the 12,000.
Is, I noticed that you have a grant kicking in, like, in the last 2 years that wasn't in the previous year. ARP ESSER, is that related to ARP?
That's one of the COVIDs. Yeah, that's one of the COVID grants, and that's what's, we have the 3-year commitment for a curriculum director, and that's the covering her entire salary.
Okay, but will that go away?
Yeah,
Too bad.
it will. That's
Too
exactly
bad.
when I was just talking about liquidation a minute ago.
Yeah,
That's
I know,
one of the
I know.
grants. That's one of the grants. So,
Okay. Well, that's what, because that like pushes us into the like 670 category versus, $500,000. But you do have a lot of grants coming in,
we do.
so.
On I'm jumping programs, but we're on the positions.
Can you tell me what program you're in?
Program 3, special education. It looks like there is a pretty significant reduction in paras and staff in general. There's a reduction, 1.26 of the teacher. There's
Three
dropping
paras.
3 paras.
Totally based upon need.
Okay.
So we don't budget for positions that we know of as of today. We're budgeting exactly based upon what's in a student's IEP hours and what our need is. That's what that number reflects. When you see also, there's a difference between, and you're gonna see a line under purchase services. I'm just sliding down to make sure I'm not making this up. That says paraprofessionals.
Yeah.
We can either hire someone through an agency, or we can hire them into our union. And we made over the last 3 years, we've probably saved $500,000 over that time frame by moving them into our union. If we can't find someone, we contact the agency and say, do you have anybody? It costs more money though. And so that's where, when you see it under the purchase service, that's the agency. And when it's up top, that's the Wilmington side of it, the union side of it. But it's entirely based upon need. And there's no, like, when you see 2.1, it's just part of a grant. It doesn't mean like there's a 0.1 of a person.
Right. Again, it just, but, totaling up, back in napkin math, there's a reduction in staff.
And it's based upon,
significant
yeah.
compared to some of the
If you
other
go to the
services.
very, I think it's the very last page of the document, second to last page, there's a full staffing account.
Yeah.
That we go through that exercise each year. I think it's important to know what's there, and we include in what's it take to run a district. So even though, we have some of our Novus staff who's a purchase service, we include those in. We include our bus drivers in. We include business office in, because you can't operate a district without bus drivers, without your business office. So even though they're not necessarily in the schools, we include those in our numbers. So when you see that people say, oh, look at, they have way more staff than E.O. Smith, I guarantee E.O. Smith is not counting their business office or their bus drivers or those other things.
So in curriculum and staff development,
Program 6.
and you're going up 10K from 8,000 to 18,500 for teacher workshops in-house.
There is a very specific training that we're doing, and it's about, if I'm looking at the right program, it's about $10,000. That's part of all the curriculum work that we've done, Steph. So
Okay.
we've hired, I think this is the one that, there's a couple that come out of this, and one that is fully grant funded. But it's the instructional program we use for math is illustrative math. And so there's funds that are going towards that. There's funds that are going towards professional development for science of reading. There's funds that are going towards problem-based learning, all directly tied to curriculum improvements that are happening over 3 years.
I knew there'd be a specific reason.
There are.
For something like that. So magnet school tuition under system-wide support, where you're budgeting about half roughly, whatever.
That's good news.
What is that?
So we're mandated when someone wants to go to a magnet school, they live in Wellington, they want to go to a magnet school, you're mandated to pay that tuition. And the tuition is they determine it, it's usually between $5,000 and $6,000, and you don't have a choice.
Right,
So-
but why are you projecting that it's gonna be
Because
that?
we had several that think that we're doing a better job than what the magnet school is doing and have returned. One is moving out, so we are receiving some savings there this year where we had a couple kids go out to magnet schools and go, wow, Wellington Public Schools is doing a great job in educating my child, and what I thought I was going to is not what I was getting, and so they've come back.
Wow.
So there's several examples of that this year in particular, and so again, we're budgeting exactly based upon what we know today for magnet. If we have 10 kids choose to go to magnet next year times $5,000 a pop, that's your non-lapsing fund. That's why you have that bump.
Excellent. I think that's all I have. Anything else?
Personal knowledge, the energy performance contract lease payment.
Oh, you really need to bring that up?
Sorry, I don't know what the hell it is.
So
Where is that?
this is the hard
Something to
thing.
make people feel nice and green and friendly.
No, it's not that. It's not that, Jeff. So this is how fast technology is moving as part of the challenges of these things. So there was a performance contract, major project that was done. Fixing the seals on the doors, putting in spray foam. They did an energy management system so things would shut down, things like that. And so the guarantee was you pay for it, and then your savings is supposed to pay for the project. Well, one of those things was lighting. Well, when we did the lighting project, we're like, wow, these lights are way better than what we have. Well, now with LEDs, they blow up the lights that we had part of that project. New LEDs blow that out of the water. And so, but you still have to pay for it. And so it's a 17-year contract is what it was. And I think we're on year 10 of course.
Yeah, so I asked that just because I wanted to know what it was, but what that remains.
Yeah.
Should we consolidate and go to a new school?
It's gonna be what it is. You're paying that bill. I said this might be one of those things. This is the unfortunate, like sometimes with end of year funds, you want to get something that is really, really meaningful for education, for kids, for staff, whatever it is. I've said maybe this is something that you pay off. It's just, it's not gonna, you're not saving any money by paying it early. You're not. You're gonna pay the bill. And again, it's supposed to be paid for by the savings, so.
So cybersecurity monitoring services, that's what, protecting the electronics.
That's part of it, and I'm not sure exactly where you are. If that's
Oh,
tied
I'm
to
sorry, it's
insurance.
system-wide support still, and it's 22,000, it's almost 23,000, nothing budgeted in the past 2 years.
So part of being eligible to get cyber insurance, which we need to make sure we have, if you get hacked. You have to have certain things in place. The annual contract for our monitoring services is that number there. It's a requirement to be eligible. Towns in the same boat. If we want to be eligible for cyber insurance, you have to put things in place. And so last year, with end of the year funds, we actually did a significant amount of cyber work to improve our infrastructure, we'll say. And there's 20 check boxes to be eligible for cyber insurance. We have checked those boxes. And so end of the year money is paid for that. Now we have the annual subscription that you have to maintain to be eligible for cyber insurance. And this is like an ongoing process for Donna, Eric, and I, and really working with Novus to try and make sure that we can get it.
We actually applied for insurance and like many other towns and school districts were denied because we hadn't done a multitude of things. So we had to do those to then be able to go out to hopefully be insurable. At what cost?
We'll see.
We will see.
And there is an increase in here based upon what we heard from Novus, what they were seeing. But until you get those rates, we don't know.
Okay. Thanks.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Lisa?
Yep. Hey, Phil, and everybody. I just wanted to know a couple of things. With respect to the registry or the agency and the purchase services, do you have a different line item like you did a couple of years ago about transportation and expenses with purchase services? It's not all in that line item, is it?
So if you're talking about special education, there is.
I'm talking about, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so as part of the purchase services, you're gonna see transportation. That is 100% special education related. And it may or may not be our M&J is our provider. But it might be a different provider. It could be EastCon, could be any agency. It depends on what the needs are in the student's individualized education plan. And if it's something specific that M&J can't provide and we have to provide it, we find the provider to do that. So that transportation cost is just for students with IEPs and it's mandated by their IEP legally. Is that what you're asking?
But I'm not sure what I'm asking because I'm driving, but I wanted to know from what I heard, when you talk about agency, are you talking about getting teachers to come in?
Paraprofessionals.
No, paraprofessionals.
Paraprofessionals.
Professionals, right. And so what I'm asking is, in the purchase services line item, do all of their benefits get wrapped up into that number? Or do you have two different line items?
No, good question. So when you hire someone through an agency, that's built into the agency fee. So there's no, so if I have two paraprofessionals that are in the purchase service line, and it's probably actually three in that 68,000. In that number that we're charged, the agency is taking care of all the benefits. There's no additional cost for that person in a different program.
And is there a prevailing wage that's set forth by the state of Connecticut so that because labor is so difficult for you to some days I'm sure it's very, very difficult, the agency can't upcharge you? Is there any sort of provisions in the regulation for education?
No,
they're registry or.
They get a lot of state funding. They get a lot of state funding. So they're educational agencies. So EastCon, Crack, Learn, ACES, they all receive, they're like a regional education association for certain towns. And so no, obviously they have to pay their bills, but they're not making all sorts of money on us, no.
Okay. So they're not profiting off of the town's tax dollars.
No,
it's reasonable and it's agreed to, right? It's a prevailing wage, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the I wanted to ask you was, I guess that was it, actually. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Any questions you have for us or?
No, I mean, thanks for
Final
listening.
slam dunks or anything?
I think the board has a really reasonable budget. I would say I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I was concerned about some of the increases. And just with the changes that we've seen, we've done a good job managing our budget and making sure, and just being transparent about what we have and needs, and returning funds. And I think this is another example of that, you know, the 13,000 today, just alone. We could leave those things in the budget and you wouldn't know otherwise. And that's just not the way we operate. So.
I have seen ample evidence of that over the years. How did you get those fuel bids down so low?
So we actually just get emails. And so as the numbers go up and down, and the last number we got in was like, okay, let's do this now. It's, you know, it's below what we budgeted. It's below last year. One of them was, you just do it. So
Calculated risk.
yeah, it is calculated risk.
Significantly
That's what
lower
it
than
is.
what we budgeted, so we just overbought.
Grab it.
Could be way worse, could be better, but that's the risk in it.
It's worth noting that in a small district like this, so many of the costs related to providing education for kids are beyond our control. So part of the reason we're so transparent and also provide money back to the district is because we're doing so in good faith that should we get a surprise, that's unfortunate, and we'd have to come back to you to ask for support for that. We would do so knowing that, you know, we typically have been giving back funding year after year, and budgeting for what we really think we need.
Thank you for those efforts.
I have,
Lisa?
Stephanie, I have another question. Yeah. Michelle and Phil. I also wanted to find out about the cybersecurity. Could you identify to me what is at risk with respect to programs? Like, do you have any, what exactly is the risk, the theft or the risk to your system?
So, good. We are required to maintain all student information. So all that grades, all that stuff, all that information, any of our financial records, all of those things. I think it seems like a long time ago, but when we were hacked, and it came out of Russia, and we had Novus and they stopped it. If they get our data and they lock our data and they hold our data, that's why when you pay a ransom to get your data back. So the risk is really keeping your documents, your student information, all of your, you know, anything dollar related, safe, and, you know, your budget. I mean, all that information, if they lock it down, you're at their mercy, you're stuck. And so those are, you know, we're required to keep those things confidential. You know, some of that's the student records especially, and we're required to keep certain items for a certain number of years. That's some of it's some of it is forever. Some of it's 50 years, some of it's, you know.
On that transparent paper in the basement.
Yeah.
So Phil and Michelle, so this is something that is every town needs this, right?
Yes.
So is there anything offered by the state to accommodate those, you know, these mandates, these insurance mandates, and the regulations that you have to protect information? Is there anything out there, or is there any sort of opportunity that the state is putting forth with a cloud or anything sort of,
It's worth,
for
it's worth
every town?
The answer, Lisa, is no. And it's worth noting that the Connecticut General Assembly's entire website and all of their emails and everything were down this week for a full day because they have issues over there too. So I'm not sure that they are as fast in offering things on the technology related to keep up with technology. I think it's actually in our best interest to not use a state solution, even if they offered one, which they do not.
I'll be frank though, this is one area I've been concerned about, that I can see this number continuing to grow because of how complex some of these attacks are and how you have to protect your information. It's just, it's
Right,
getting. But no, they're
right,
not.
I agree.
To support it.
I agree, but I also, and Michelle, I agree with you too, but at the same time, 169 towns, all having risk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there should be something that the state.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, there should be an economy of scale
Consortium of
that where we
protection
could
or
save money
something.
Right.
by doing it all together or having another solution.
Right.
There is a lot of talk of increasing state grants to schools for next year. We'll wait and see what actually passes the legislature, if that affects us at all. But as always, we have to do our budget before the state comes through with anything. So
No, I understand that. I get all that. I do understand that, but I'm still, as a taxpayer, wanting to understand what foresight the state has and what sort of
Higher level solutions might be.
no, just the town working together, all the towns working together, because what will happen is that those that paid the highest bid will have the highest protection. And that isn't conducive towards public education. So I just, there's issues with it. And I struggle with the fact that the regulation is so loosey-goosey with school systems. So that's why I asked you that.
that is good feedback to provide back to CCM though, because CCM is also the home of KERMA for the insurance. So they haven't offered it at this point. It's not something that's in the works, but I think that we could provide that back to the powers that be. And the more different folks they hear from, if they could see that they could make a profit in it themselves to offer it, and they could if they offered it to 169 towns, I'm sure there'd be plenty of profit to be made.
That KERMA money comes back, like any, those profits are
Yeah.
shared back amongst
Yeah,
ourselves. They do
but-
offer a cyber insurance, we can go through them where they work with a carrier, but I think what
Right.
she's talking about is instead of individual towns going in to a pool, it would be all of us working together.
Who was the agency that came through and
Right.
did the full, it was a governmental agency, military based.
Yeah.
Somebody came through and they sat down with towns and said, you should be considering all of these things.
Because
And
of
we-
like our election information, all
Yeah.
of that is very.
But it was, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it was, I found it to be at the defense level spending, if you know what I mean? Where there's a
Yes, I do.
bucket.
I do. And I just think that, I'm sorry if I'm talking because I'm sorry, I can't hear too good, but I'm just driving home from work. So I just wanted to find out if, there is some foresight with, like what you're speaking to, I think is very good. And therefore, are there grants and are you always continually looking for grants?
Yeah, I mean, based upon, you can see how much money we have in grants, yes. But you also, sometimes it's not about the grant, it's about having the right group. And I can't speak highly enough of Novus. Our work that we've done with them and the work they've done for us has been unbelievable. This town and this district has take leaps and bounds in the last several years since we've started working with them. We are way more protected. Our systems are way more efficient in operating than we've ever
Okay.
been. And I will tell you that they have a department that just does cybersecurity. And they came in with some like, hey, these are general recommendations. You need these are next level recommendation, and then these are your dream level recommendations. And so they give us a good balance of what we're applying for what they know, we can reasonably afford.
Got it. Okay.
2 points to
Thank
this
you.
is, one, I think when the state comes to help on this, it'll come in the form of an unfunded mandate. That's one thing, and two, after years of professionally dealing with Connecticut Do It, the Department of Information Technology, I think you are very, very wise to not go that way.
They hired an agency just to do, there's a new online program, CT SEDS, for special education. And it's probably the biggest struggle they've ever seen technologically. It's every district is required to implement, and it's been a significant challenge this year. I'll say that in the nicest manner that we can say.
Oh, I won't.
They must be in the same boat though, where they're trying to protect their data.
They have.
So,
Look at the,
yeah.
look at
But
the
they may
State
be less ready
Election
to.
Enforcement Commission, their reporting.
Yeah.
Their interface is about the worst I've seen of any computer interface ever.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation and the quality of it and the results. So dealer's choice, Christina, we can talk about this next week when we talk about the town budgets, or you can orient people now when they've got their fresh, colorful copy.
Well, I was thinking, before we go into the meeting next week with the school building committee, I just want to point out maybe some of the highlights on here, just.
I think
not
that's a
go
good
into the
idea.
Details. 'Cause
And that
people
meeting is Monday, so.
Yeah, so you all are familiar with the CIP.
I was on it.
Yeah, well, you see it every year. It's a little different this year. We have some more colors. Color coded. And it's split up by department, and there's the things that are in bold are.
Can you share that, Sam?
Are you talking about page 9 or 10?
Nine. Page 9. So if you look like under EMS, for example, line 25. Above that are all of the things that are fire department related. The things that are in bold at the very top of that section are things that we've already previously committed to paying for in the form of leases, or in the case of the library bond, the library bond. So the thing that's new on this chart, we did have a placeholder in last year for a school project. It was a lot less than what it is now. And we have actual details of when these potential payments would happen, in which years, and how much they are. So that's the thing that, I'm sure you've all seen the different charts from the school building committee showing the tax increase potential. And there's the online tool people can go and look at. But basically, this is where you see the payments happening in each of the years. And without getting into too much detail, to me, like if you look at the very bottom where there's the bright yellow, if you scroll down, Smith, the yellow squares is where this, I guess I would say you should look, because in the first column we have our local spending target, which is the target that we try to hit every year. And Peter, you might remember it used to be 550,000 for
every year. And then we were trying to increase it, but not, because we recognized that we had all these things that we were not doing, that we have not been able to fund.
So we've been making an effort to increase that and make the targets higher. So this year's target is $780,000. We actually, if you add up all the lease payments and the bond payments and the things that are gonna be coming out of the selectmen's budget, for our local spend that needs to come from, out of operating budget, we came in at 779, so we're only $1,000 off of our target in year one. But year two is where we start to blow out, so our target next year, in year two, would be 858,000. With the first bond payment, and well, I don't think it's the actual payment of it, it's like a,
it's the note.
it's the note payment. That puts us at 1.4 million, which is, I mean, even if you took out the, if you just used, well,
it's important, you have the firehouse
right,
projects in here as well as road improvements.
right. So that's the other thing is this sort of puts some of those other things in perspective as well, that I know Ralph was talking about, to think about all of the things that are going on. But you can see year after year after year how it goes. And I think it does add up to basically what was predicted in the model but it's a little bit higher because of the fire department bond that happens in year three. And there's a road project bond that's also in here for Liska Road and Schofield Road. So you can look at all the details on how it all flows, but basically the numbers at the bottom are numbers we have not seen, and that's really where these mill rate increases are illustrated. So how else to explain it? But
Just to be clear, as the new guy, the general obligation bonds for the firehouse and the roadway all need to be voted on again and approved by the voters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's none of that.
yeah, so this is just a plan. It's like it's a tool we use to try to look ahead for 5 years. We want to look ahead even more than that, but the first 5 years is hard enough. Even just the first year is hard. And the first year, when we vote on all of these things, like if you look at line 26, which is the 2018 dump truck lease payment for $16,000. That's something we have to pay. That is something that is in the Public Works operating budget. And we'll see that number in line 311. And the line 15, which is the fire department SCBA purchase from 2018, which is also a lease payment for $17,000. That's actually in the selectmen's budget. So all of those numbers, are going to be in the operating budget that gets voted on. And so really just year one is the year that's binding when we approve this. The rest of it isn't, but it is if it's a lease payment or a bond payment, because we have to make those payments.
The payments are voted on, but the acquisition of things that we lease, items that we lease, are not part of the referendum process, are they?
No, they're just.
I mean, lease is almost it almost bypasses the, the voter approval.
They're part of the budget referendum. That's what you're.
Right, but it's pieced out. I mean, it's not like, oh, that they vote on the larger cost of what's being.
But if say a budget were voted down and had to be cut, those of us that had to make those hard decisions wouldn't be cutting those dollars. We'd know that those are obligations we have to pay, so we'd have to find a cut somewhere else.
I mean, in theory, a piece of equipment could get repossessed. Like if we didn't pay for a dump truck, they'd come and take it.
Right.
But if we don't pay a school bond, they can't come and take the school bond. We have to pay that. So, yeah. So anyway, this is just how it all lays out. But what you can see is if the school is approved with these numbers, and everyone knows that in year 4 is the big year when the first bond payment happens, if that's the biggest jump, we might want to consider trying to level this out a little bit and have it so we maybe put some money in reserve this year to help offset the huge jump that will happen in that year. Well, each year there's a pretty significant jump, but that one in particular is
In
very,
capital reserve.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something we can talk about, but something to think about.
We did talk about that on CIP
Mhm.
briefly.
Yeah, and this is more of a larger, when we get down to looking at the operating budget and understanding what those increases are and how much we want to use from the fund balance and how much is going to Region 19, and all of those things that we always talk about. If there's some wiggle room, maybe we should put some money in reserves. Maybe something to think about, but
This previously committed local spending total is all of the bold items.
yes,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's the obligation that we can't touch.
Yeah, and also the library, when we were in the meeting, the CIP meeting, we thought that the last library bond payment was actually in year 5, but Donna checked and it's actually in year 4. So that last payment for the library is 26, 27, and it's 153,000. And
Where does that show up in here?
43.
on line 49. Oh, actually 43, and the total's in 49.
This is a process matter. CIP is a report to the Board of Selectmen and they approve or disapprove it. It's not a report to the Board of Finance because we play with, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
but I think you do. So if they're an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen, but it's part of the budget that you have authority over.
All right.
And then
Yeah,
the
well,
plan
but
itself,
Plan itself goes to the Board of Selectmen.
and then the plan itself is approved at the annual town meeting.
Only the first year of it.
No, the
The whole
plan,
thing.
the whole plan is approved at town meeting. The first year, those funds that are within the operating budget are part of the budget that goes to referendum.
Yeah.
To make it totally simple.
Yes. Yeah, but what we typically do, things is we tend to push things out. We keep talking, year 5 is always a very popular year to put things in because it's not,
Things stay in year 5 for like 20 years.
Because
Yeah.
people don't want it to fall out of the
Yeah.
plan, but there's no come to Jesus in that.
right.
know.
And the school project has been one of those projects. It's been sort of sitting out there. And then last year was the first year we tried to put some real numbers or just proxy numbers to see what would happen. And now we're actually seeing what would happen. So.
Okay, do we want to talk about the fund budget projections, or we can deal with that next week?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys wanted to ask something specific, but the second page 10 is Donna's cheat sheet for all of the special funds that we have. And, within the CIP chart, you'll see like in column O, it has codes for the different funds that we would take the money out of. So like if you look at line 54 for the accessory evaluation, it says 32,000 coming out of FO4, that's fund 4, which is capital reserve. And I'm just looking for where that is. On the cheat sheet side, it's like the second column over. It says Fund 4, General Reserve. And right now there's $122,000 in it. But we plan to put 460,000 in it. And then we plan to spend, and it shows, if you go down below, you can see all the different projects that are gonna get spent out of it. So basically, it's just like a running tally of all these different funds. And we can't let the funds go to zero or in the negative. So that's sort of the puzzle of the CIP. But right now it balances. So that's good.
Bonus.
So that's good.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Appreciate that. So on the SBC, I mean, SBC hasn't met since Jim did an update, but why I put that on the agenda was just to kind of make sure you guys had, if you had any questions, and that you feel somewhat rooted with the process next Monday, this coming Monday.
That agenda is out.
And yeah, and I put it in, we put it in the packet, so it should be,
On the second page.
should be in there.
On the back of today's.
Got it? Yeah, it looks like it says joint board. It looks like this.
Looks like
So-
you can see Phil, yeah.
So you could, sure.
I have asked the SBC to do a condensed version of the presentation, because formally, the Board of Selectmen has not seen that presentation again, and then so there will be ample time for discussion, and that meeting is not timed. It is as much time as both boards need to discuss the issues at hand. I think that's important to know, and it's the only topic of this special meeting.
And it will be in here, and it'll sort of, like, Eric and I will probably be somewhere around the middle of the table, and then, you know, one board can be on one arm and the other board on the other, but it's, you can see it, you can see on the agenda that there's sort of discussion together, and then there's, you know, steps and a discussion with only the Board of Finance on, you know, the recommending to appropriate kind of actions. And then the selectmen, it's they have their own discussion. I mean, we stay, you know, but that's the, I'd like to have as many people in the room as we can for that, you know, and as few on Zoom as possible, just to make the discussion a little easier to, you know.
What's the point of present to speak at the end?
That's.
Are you suggesting it be removed?
Yeah.
Well, you decide everything and then you have present to speak.
Well, because I think the easy answer is that's kind of true of a lot of meetings, you know, actions taken and they want to
The
react.
work is done of the boards and commissions, and this is a very specific topic. I will say, look, I've looked at historically how the town has handled similar projects, whether it be the ADA, the bonding projects, and most of those meetings didn't have any present to speak at all. So, you know, to that, I think allowing the opportunity for public to speak is always important. But the work here is very specific, potential actions of these boards in order to move the process to a referendum of the taxpayers.
We have pulled it from other meetings recently, so like planning and zoning just dropped their present to speak. at the beginning of the meeting.
Oh, they did?
Their present to speak has always been at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Historically, when I mean, long before the current board.
But you can't comment on anything on their agenda.
Yeah, but they have very, very different.
Guidelines, I know,
Yeah,
or
the-
statutory
Yeah.
requirements, yeah.
That is correct. So theirs has always been structured different than most boards. And I will say, in years past, many boards and commissions didn't have a present to speak until the end of the meeting. It didn't occur at the beginning of the meeting until later. Or didn't occur at the end until after. It was only one place we've upped that, and so.
Could I just take a quick poll of those of us who are here and also online, the alternates as well as, the full members, who's gonna be here Monday? Who can be here? Everybody?
I'll be there.
It's 6:30,
Okay.
correct?
It's at 6:30, yeah, note the time difference for from our usual meeting time.
It's our meeting.
I know it is, I know it is.
We like early.
We know
We
that.
like earlier.
So, okay, so that's all I have really on that unless, and I don't know about, I just put budget season follow-up in case anyone wanted to bring up any carryover issue, but you know, it's 9:40 and I'm thinking it's a good time to end things, so. Are you guys good with that? We can talk
Sure.
about budget next
I'm
one.
good with that.
Okay. So- Correspondence all here. Thank you, Sam, for printing out. And is there anyone present to speak?
Pete Kincher said he wanted to speak, but
Pete, is he still around?
he's there, a second row.
Okay. Oh, he's got a hand up.
Well, no, Nick got his hand up.
Okay. Ralph? Would you like to speak?
Well, if you want me to, I'd be happy to.
We'd be happy to have you speak.
Just a couple comments. Number one, I trust that the Board of Finance will be very mindful of the CIE impacts that are projected 3 to 4 or more years in advance, because they're going to have a substantial impact by my guesstimates. And I think they need to be carefully considered when a project is chosen. With respect to my spreadsheet on steroids, as some people have called it, it's a tool that I developed on my own. It is not a tool specifically developed for the SBC. It's something that should not be available to the public because it has many more variables in it that would cause numbers to be really bizarre if it's misused. I primarily developed it for my own use to determine a more realistic estimate of future impact. I offered to run it for any scenario the Board of Finance would like, knowing full well that the variables employed would be best considered by those who are close to the CIP and the budget process. I will happily sit with anyone who would like to do that. Pick a time between now and Monday, and I'll make time for it. Other than that, you guys have some pretty tricky numbers to wrestle with. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Yeah. Pete?
Hi, good evening, all. I apologize for extending the meeting. I tried to do the first person to speak, but it just said I couldn't enter the room. So I'm entering now, 97 Trask Road. I want to comment on first the CIP budget that was passed by the Board of Selectmen the other evening. I have grave concerns about this budget. It seems to be a fundamental departure from our past practices. There are large-scale increases for large projects like roads and new firehouses and other major projects that appear to be concurrent with what could potentially be the new school project commitments, as well as medium and small projects for DPW equipment, road improvements, etc. It doesn't appear that there's any kind of plan anymore in CIP. It appears if you just submit a request, it's accepted and put into the schedule. Almost as if CIP is now just an extension of every town department's budget. This seems to have the kind of going off the cliff ramifications that Christina alluded to earlier that are now even more deeply concerning to me. So I urge the Board of Finance to look at this carefully. Secondly, I'm very concerned about the overall budget and how CIP and other town commitments, such as the library bond that's still outstanding for a number of years, the Siemens energy performance lease for both school buildings that Superintendent Stevens spoke about tonight, that I think, as he put it, we just have to pay, as well as all of the leases that seem to be in use for everything we purchase for public works. All of this impacts the single year budget that you're working on. I was hoping this evening that we would be able to hear something from Ralph Toulis, the Vice Chair of the School Building Committee, on how that works in his detailed spreadsheet, but it didn't appear there was time for that. I hope there will be at Monday night's meeting when you have your joint meeting, so the public has a better understanding of how all these costs impact our annual budget and annual budgets in the years to come. I also hope that for this year's budget, there is a public hearing. Unfortunately, the selectmen have chosen not to have a public hearing for the school project, despite its $68 million size. I'm hoping the Board of Finance will follow past practice and have a public hearing so that we might better understand all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nick Tella?
Hey, Nick Tella, 49 Myrtle. Just three things I wrote down here. Just the combination of the CIP plan and new school costs is just primed to severely hurt the taxpayer. I hope you guys, really look at those numbers. Second is the budget. I saw that during Phil's presentation that there were some grants that come to us and such. Some of those grants were, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, Title I for center and maybe Title I for hall. If there was a combination to a pre-K 8 school, would some of those grants go away? And then my third comment is just, I understand that there was bragging about how money's going back that wasn't completely spent and such. To me, it's not really a bragging point when you have $1.3 million going back, and that money could have went to the schools to repair the schools. So I wouldn't really brag about not repairing the schools and such. So, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else out in Cyberland? Oh, in the room? Michelle?
Michelle Doucette Cunningham, 41 Lister Road. Just for clarification purposes, we did not say that there was $1.3 million being returned to the budget from the school budget. So I just wanted to clarify that that was not correct understanding. If he meant a different line item, that's fine, but just for point of clarification.
There was 1.3 in the presentation. Thank you.
I'm sorry, we don't really have it back and forth, and but I think that was not the number that was discussed about returning, so.
It was. Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah. How about good and welfare?
Oh, I'm good. You want welfare, Jim?
No, just don't preempt. Is there any good and welfare? Lots to chew on it before Monday night, so please do. Okay, you can do it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Keep going, Johnson.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.